Chapter 1273. Although the courtyard wasn't big, there were still more than 10 rooms. Since they had nothing to do, Murong Yu and the other two each chose a room to cultivate and experience the wonders of the array in the house. At this moment, Murong Yu was sitting cross-legged on the bed. He spread out his spiritual sense to feel the array. It didn't take long for Murong Yu to understand what was going on. The house he was in only had one array in the entire courtyard. Endless fire, attribute heaven, and earth yuan qi was constantly being extracted from the depths of the ground by the array, filling the entire room. Murong Yu could easily feel that the fire attribute heaven and earth yuan qi in his room was at least 10 times denser than the fire attribute energy on the streets outside. In fact, Murong Yu had already noticed it when he entered the courtyard. However, perhaps it was because of the array. No matter how dense the fire attribute elements in the house were, they wouldn't leak out of the house, not even a trace. When Murong Yu was trying to figure out what was so special about this array, a look of surprise flashed across his face. Hichu, what grade of flame is this heaven fire? It's actually so much stronger than ordinary flames. The ordinary flames that Murong Yu was referring to weren't the flames that were commonly seen in the mortal world. He was referring to the ordinary flames in the sacred world. These ordinary flames could easily exterminate a super expert in the quasi-saint realm. However, the current heavenly fire was much more powerful than those ordinary flames. If the strength of an ordinary flame was 1, then the heaven fire that Murong Yu sensed was at least 1,000 or even 10,000. There are 2 ways to understand the heaven fire. 1 is the heaven fire. It's a flame that entered our world from beyond the heavens. It's extremely terrifying. The other way to understand it is the heaven fire race. It's obvious that the people of the world treat the heaven fire city's heaven fire as heaven fire. It wasn't difficult for Murong Yu to understand the heaven fire. The so-called heaven fire referred to beyond the heavens and beyond the world. It was like the sun and stars in the heavens. These existences didn't exist in the world that Murong Yu was in. The heaven fire also belonged to this grade. However, Murong Yu of the Sky Fire Tribe found it hard to understand. There are billions of races in the Saints' world. Wait, aren't there only 3 major races in the Saints' world? The Sacred Clan, the Human Clan, and the Demon Clan? Murong Yu quickly interrupted Hichu. Hichu's words had seriously distorted his worldview. Hichu sneered. Who told you that there are only 3 races in the heaven realm? But you're not wrong. The human race and the demon race were both races that had ascended from the lower realm. The sacred race is the natives of the original sacred world. Do you think the sacred race is just a race? It was all-encompassing and contained countless races. Humans, dragons, phoenixes, and so on. Murong Yu was instantly thrown into disarray. He had always thought that there were only 2 races in the sacred race, the human race and the demon race. However, that would be a little too powerful. But now that he knew that there were so many races in Shenzhen, it was more normal for so many races to join forces to suppress the human race and the demon race that had ascended from the lower realm. The Sky Fire Tribe is one of the races in the sacred race. However, it can't be compared to the prosperity of the human race and the demon race. The Sky Fire Tribe's clansmen are even fewer than the dragon race and the phoenix race. However, although the Sky Fire Tribe's clansmen are few, their strength is extremely terrifying. Legend has it that the newborn babies of the Sky Fire Tribe will have the strength of the undead realm and the profound sage realm, or even higher. Murong Yu was stunned. Wasn't the Sky Fire Tribe too heaven-defying? Even the powerful dragon race was definitely not so heaven-defying. Of course, perhaps it was because they were too heaven-defying that they didn't have many clansmen. No, Hichu, you're saying that there might be a powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe suppressed below the Sky Fire City? Murong Yu suddenly reacted and asked in surprise. I'm almost certain that it's a powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe suppressed below. If it was an ordinary Sky Fire, it would have burned out long ago. Only a powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe can last for a long time. Moreover, even that almighty of the human race couldn't annihilate it. Murong Yu's eyes flickered and a smile appeared on his face. Hichu, don't tell me that you're thinking the same thing as me. You're thinking exactly what I'm thinking. Then, the two of them laughed heartily at each other. What were they thinking? They were actually so happy. Hichu transformed into a figure and appeared in front of Murong Yu. His expression was somewhat solemn as he said, "Use the powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe to temper your body and even directly refine his power. If you succeed, your strength will definitely soar. However, this powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe is definitely extremely powerful. We need to be careful. Otherwise, what awaits us will be eternal damnation." Murong Yu nodded with a solemn expression. Although strength was important, the most important thing was still one's life. They actually wanted to use the power of the powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe to raise their own realm. Of course, this was just an idea. If they wanted to implement it, there were still many restrictions. For example, right now, they didn't even know how to rush down. However, wouldn't everyone be able to go deep into the ground soon? When that time came, Murong Yu could go down. According to my observations, the entire Sky Fire City is an extremely huge formation that is suppressing the powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe underground. Every house in Heavenly Fire City was a small array formation that connected with the entire Heavenly Fire City, complementing each other. Most importantly, every small formation in the city is constantly extracting the power of the powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe to supply to Sky Fire City. Murong Yu's expression changed slightly. This almighty of the human race who was suppressing the powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe was truly terrifying. He was using the power of the powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe to suppress the powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe. As long as the powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe didn't die, the power of Sky Fire City wouldn't be cut off. As long as the power of the seal wasn't cut off, the powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe wouldn't be able to escape, unless someone destroyed the seal. It was just that countless years had passed, and no one had destroyed the seal. Looks like the powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe could only cry under the seal and suppression, swallowing speechlessly. However, this powerhouse of the Sky Fire Tribe could only be suppressed and not killed. One could imagine how powerful his strength was. If he escaped one day, it would definitely be a huge disaster for the human race. The power extracted by the formation was much denser than outside. One E and Gongsun Ningyu were both making the best use of their time to cultivate. However, this power had no effect on Murong Yu. It was just a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. Hence, he left the house and started to wander around the city. During this process, he saw that the powerhouses of Sky Fire City kept increasing. Among them, there was no lack of powerhouses. Furthermore, these people were not just fire tribute saints. Presumably, it was close to the Sky Fire's weakening period. These people came from all over, preparing to hunt for treasures. After walking around Sky Fire City and getting familiar with it, Murong Yu returned. However, he bumped into Old Man Yi at the door. This red-faced old man was currently catching a few people and fooling them. Murong Yu immediately understood that this guy was bragging about his house again. This old man's background is definitely not simple. In this Sky Fire City, where every inch of land is worth gold, he actually has so many properties. Furthermore, this guy seems to be wandering around outside all day and doesn't need to cultivate. Murong Yu leaned against the door and watched his old man. He spouted all sorts of extravagant words. Hichu, do you think someone can hide their strength? Even the light of their power can't be emitted? Looking at the weak light of an ordinary saint on Old Man Ye's body, Murong Yu felt more and more suspicious of this guy's strength. There should be. Some super powerhouses have methods that you can't imagine, Hichu replied. Then do you think this old man is some super powerhouse? I can't tell, Hichu answered honestly. After looking at Old Man Yi for a long time, the more he looked, the more he felt that this guy was not simple. If he was really a saint, how could he have so many properties? Because in less than half a day, many people have been fooled by him. We want this room. Tell them to move out. At this time, Old Man Yi fooled another group of people over. 7 or 8 people, Each of them looked fierce. When they passed by Murong Yu's house, a big man glanced at Murong Yu's house and shouted at Old Man Yi. Murong Yu's face revealed a smile, but he did not say anything. He just looked at Old Man Yi indifferently. This house is already occupied. I'm sorry. Old Man Yi's expression did not change. Old man, 1,000 low-rank Saint Crystals. We want this house. Another big man shouted coldly. At the same time, he walked towards Murong Yu. Brat, you better get out of my way. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. As he spoke, the big man had already reached out his big hand to grab Murong Yu. Murong Yu still suppressed his realm to the Saint realm, but the big man who attacked was a high-level Great Saint. His speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the big hand had already grabbed Murong Yu's face. A cold light flashed in Murong Yu's eyes. The big man's power was definitely not just to capture Murong Yu, but to kill Murong Yu. However, Murong Yu stood there motionlessly, as if he'd been scared witless. Asterisk cough cough. Asterisk at this moment, Old Man Yi hurriedly coughed. Then, a big fiery red hand quickly condensed in the sky above the house behind Murong Yu. Before Old Man Yi's dry cough fell, the big hand had already quickly slapped down. With a bang, the big man who attacked was directly sent flying. Everyone, you can't casually attack in Heavenfire City. Otherwise, you will incur the wrath of heaven. Old Man Yi coughed and looked with a smile at the big man who was sent flying and vomiting blood. Everyone looked at the big bloody hand in the sky with a horrified expression. They could all feel that this big hand could completely kill them. It was just a matter of a slap. Murong Yu's eyes also flashed with a bright light. He clearly felt that this big hand was controlled by Old Man Yi. This guy was really getting more and more mysterious. Chapter 1274. Old Man, you're courting death. While everyone was still in shock, the fiery red hand in the sky had already disappeared. The moment the hand disappeared, a burly man roared and slashed at Old Man Yi with his palm. Old Man Yi was just an ordinary sage. Of course, this was what he showed. The burly man who attacked was in the Great Sage realm. In a blink of an eye, the big hand had already slashed down and was about to split Old Man Yi in half. Murong Yu looked at Old Man Yi with flickering eyes, but he didn't save him, because he believed that Old Man Yi was definitely not an ordinary sage. Moreover, Old Man Yi didn't look nervous at all at this time. He still had a smile on his face that deserved a beating. Chi! Just as Old Man Yi was about to be killed by the burly man, a sharp piercing gaze shot over from afar. Hearing this piercing sound, everyone's hearts skipped a beat, because at this moment, their hearts were shrouded by a terrifying and dangerous aura. A dazzling light shot over. The burly man's eyes seemed to be dazzled, and the movement of his hand actually stopped for a moment. At this moment, everyone saw a silver-white sword light break through the obstruction of the void and appear in front of the burly man. The burly man was obviously shocked. The big hand that was slashing at Old Man Yi also stopped and was about to slash at the sword light. However, just as his hand paused, the sword light had already swept past his body and then disappeared. The burly man stood on the spot and looked in the direction where the sword light slashed over with a shocked expression. However, the huge hand that he had sent out had stopped in the void, and even its power had been retracted. What's going on? Seeing that the burly man had been maintaining this posture, his companions were a little puzzled. Immediately, one of them took a step forward and slapped the burly man's shoulder. At the same time, he asked, "Don't tell me he's dead?" Bang! Just as this person's big hand touched the burly man's shoulder, the burly man's body suddenly shattered. Everyone saw pieces of flesh and bones that were cut into the same size, as if they had exploded and shot out in all directions. The person who patted the burly man's shoulder was scared silly. His face was pale, and his eyes looked at the fragments that were shooting in all directions. His body couldn't help but tremble. The others were the same. Their faces were filled with shock. A cold light flashed in the depths of Murong Yu's eyes, and a trace of surprise flashed across his face. Just now, he clearly saw that the man's body was divided into 10 million pieces of the same size. Moreover, the strangest thing was that even though this person's body had been dismembered to such an extent, his blood did not drip out. This was the power of a single sword light. What kind of existence was this expert that had attacked? How could it be so terrifying? Plop. With a muffled sound, the man who used his hand to slap the burly man sat on the ground. Then, he rolled his eyes and fainted. He fainted from fright. The other men weren't any better. They were all terrified and their legs were trembling. Only Old Man Yu was still smiling, and his expression did not change at all. How dare you attack in Skyfire City? Kill without mercy. At this moment, a group of people strode over from afar. Their expressions were cold and murderous as they looked at the burly men. 5 undying realm experts. Murong Yu's pupils abruptly shrank. It wasn't because these people were very powerful. Undying realm experts weren't qualified to make Murong Yu react this way. The reason why Murong Yu was shocked was because of the identities of these people. City guards. Yes, they were all wearing the same uniform. If they weren't city guards, then what were they? In White Sun City, which was of the same level, undying realm experts were already at the ancestor level. The city guards were only low-level sages. In Skyfire City, the city guard were all at the undying realm. Just how powerful was this Skyfire City? Hearing this, the burly men were almost scared to death. Each of them had no choice but to be terrified. He's your role model. I'm sure you've learned your lesson. Get out of Skyfire City immediately and never set foot in Skyfire City again. Otherwise, you'll be killed without mercy. A city guard who looked like a leader shouted coldly. At the same time, he stretched out his large hand and grabbed one of the burly men in the air. The burly man was shocked. He wanted to resist, but realized that he couldn't. Hence, in the blink of an eye, he was caught by the city guard. Then he felt himself being lifted up into the air. With a swoosh, the burly man was thrown out of Skyfire City by the city guard as if he was a piece of trash. At the same time, the other city guards made their move as well. Grabbing and kicking, he directly threw these people out. After throwing these fierce-looking burly men out of Skyfire City, these city guards didn't even look at Murong Yu. They only bowed respectfully in front of Old Man Yi and quickly disappeared from Skyfire City. Seeing this, Murong Yu became more and more suspicious of Old Man Ye's identity. From the beginning to the end, Old Man Ye's face had a smile that deserved a beating. After the city guards left, Old Man Yi only glanced at Murong Yu indifferently before turning to leave. Murong Yu hurriedly chased after him. Old Man Yi, don't you have anything to say? Old Man Yi looked at Murong Yu in astonishment. What do you want me to say? For example, that fiery red hand, the city guards, or your hidden strength? Murong Yu looked at Old Man Yi and directly voiced his doubts. Old Man Yi only smiled and said, there's nothing much to say. That fiery red hand is an ability of every room's array. I'm the owner of the room, so naturally, I can use it. As for the city guards, you know that they're the city guards. They have a duty to maintain Skyfire City security, so it's normal for them to take action. Pausing, Old Man Yi looked at Murong Yu suspiciously. Young man, your eyesight is so bad at such a young age. This old man is only a first-order saint. How can I hide my strength? Murong Yu looked at Old Man Yi with a black face and cursed in his heart. Keep pretending. Keep pretending. Young man, hurry up and cultivate. 50,000 low-grade crystal stones a month isn't cheap. As for me, I'm going home to eat. After saying this, Old Man Yi leisurely walked away. So you know that it's expensive? Then why are you charging so much? Murong Yu hurriedly chased after her. Today, he must find out Old Man Yi's secret. Old Man Yi, how long have you been in Skyfire City? This old man has been in Skyfire City for half of my life. While answering, Old Man Yi's footsteps didn't stop. Then do you know the history of Skyfire City? Also, not long after, Skyfire City became weak. As the landlord, you should tell me this, right? Murong Yu asked slowly, trying to fish out Old Man Yi's identity. Legend has it that Skyfire City was formed when a heavenly fire fell from the heavens and was suppressed by a great expert. As for the heavenly fire weakening, it happens every once in a while. No one knows the reason. Murong Yu chuckled. Old man Yi, is it really a heavenly fire? Or is it something else? For example, a powerhouse? Hearing this, Old Man Ye's eyes flashed with an extremely obscure light. His body, which had been walking all this time, also paused slightly in an imperceptible manner. However, all of this was seen by Murong Yu, who had been watching him. This old man definitely knows the secret. Murong Yu thought in his heart, but at this time, Old Man Yu spoke. Young man, I've never heard of any powerhouse you're talking about. At this point, Old Man Yu paused and turned to look at Murong Yu. He said in a deep voice, Young man, there are some things you shouldn't know. It's best if you don't blindly get involved. Otherwise, trouble comes from the mouth. As a person, you must know your place and do your part well. Don't meddle in other people's business. There was a strong sense of warning in these words. Moreover, after saying these words, Old Man Ye's figure disappeared from Murong Yu's sight. Even Murong Yu didn't know where Old Man Yu went. Even with the aura detection technique, he couldn't see Old Man Ye's remaining aura in the void. Murong Yu was startled, but he quickly recovered from his shock. If Old Man Yu was really one of those super powerhouses, he could suppress his power and pretend to be a true first-rank sage. Naturally, he had the ability to restrain his own aura. Hichu, what kind of existence do you think this Old Man Yu is? Murong Yu's heart was beating like a drum. If he really suppressed his realm, then he's definitely a super powerhouse, extremely strong. You can't provoke him. Definitely. Super powerhouse, extremely strong. You can't provoke him. This was the first time Hichu had such a high evaluation of someone. However, the higher the evaluation, the more pressure Murong Yu felt. This person is extremely dangerous. Don't come into contact with him for no reason. Otherwise, if he finds out your secret, you won't be able to escape. Hichu warned, if he dares to have any ideas about me, I'll kill him. Murong Yu smiled faintly and said indifferently, the stronger Old Man Yu was, the greater the pressure he gave him, but the greater the motivation. These people, even if they were ruler-level existences, would be Murong Yu's stepping stones to become the strongest. Sooner or later, they would be trampled under his feet. Heavenly Flame City actually has such a powerhouse overseeing it. Looks like I have to be more careful in the future. Don't fail miserably. Murong Yu thought to himself, then turned around and walked back. Although he didn't seem to care, if he really was that kind of person, how could he still be alive? Young man, interesting, really interesting. A spatial treasure with an artifact spirit that's not inferior to a human's intelligence. This level of treasure would be a supreme treasure in the holy world. What Murong Yu didn't know was that Old Man Yu didn't really leave. Instead, he was secretly observing him. If Murong Yu were to find out that Old Man Yu could actually see the He-Tu and the Luo Shu, would he be shocked? Chapter 1275. Following the arrival of the Heavenly Fire's weakening period, more and more people rushed into Heavenly Fire City. In the end, those who entered Heavenly Fire City could not even find a place to stay. Not to mention a house like Murong Yu's. They did not even have an ordinary house. One could only imagine how many people rushed into Heavenly Fire City. Because of the mysterious Old Man Yi, Murong Yu was more well-behaved these days. He just quietly cultivated in his house. He had no choice. Ever since he guessed Old Man Yi's strength, he always felt that there was a pair of eyes watching him from the dark. He did not dare to do anything. Originally, Murong Yu wanted to study those formations to see if he could discover anything from them. However, he was still wary of Old Man Yi. Boom! On this day, the Heavenly Fire underground erupted again. However, no matter how fierce the Heavenly Fire was, it was easily suppressed by Heavenly Fire City. In the house, Murong Yu did not even open his eyes when he heard the sound of the Heavenly Fire erupting. Originally, it was erupting once every 3 days. Now it's erupting once a day. I'm afraid the weakening period is coming. Murong Yu thought to himself. He was looking forward to it even more. It turned out that 3 days after staying in Heavenly Fire City, the Heavenly Fire erupted again. That time, it scared Morong Yu and the other two who did not know anything. However, when Old Man Yu told them that this was a normal situation before the heavenly fire's weakening period, they calmed down. By now, they were already used to it. This was because they felt the power of Heavenly Fire City. In other words, the Almighty who suppressed the heavenly fire had left behind a powerful and heaven-defying technique. Rumble. On this day, after suppressing the erupting heavenly fire, a loud noise suddenly came from the center of Heavenly Fire City. A teleportation gate was slowly taking shape. This teleportation gate was the teleportation formation that led to the depths of the ground. If one wanted to enter the heavenly fire, they had to go down from here. Otherwise, it was impossible to reach the center of the heavenly fire. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. When the teleportation formation was formed, most of the people in Heavenly Fire City moved. One by one, they rushed toward the teleportation gate. After the teleportation gate was formed, many of the saints rushed into it. Morong Yu and the other two also arrived near the teleportation gate. Why is it only nearby? Because there were too many people, they couldn't get close. Before entering the portal, Morong Yu instructed Gong Sun Ningyu and Gong Sun Ningyu. Be careful when you enter the heavenly fire. You might not be together. When Morong Yu saw the transfer gate, he had a feeling that the place they'd entered this time might be an independent space. This kind of space was usually teleported at will. Moreover, everyone had their own opportunities. Morong Yu did not want to always keep Gong Sun Ningyu by his side. That way, Gong Sun Ningyu would become a flower in a greenhouse, unable to grow. Swish. After saying that, Morong Yu stepped into the portal. After the scenery in front of him changed for a while, Morong Yu came to a strange space. Fire. The sky, the ground, and even the void were all fire. This was a world of fire. However, these flames were like the flames of the mortal world. They had no effect on Morong Yu. However, what surprised Morong Yu was that the space he was in was like a world. There were mountains and rivers, but they were all flames. What flowed in the river was also fire water. This should be a self-formed space. A space formed by the Heavenly Fire Clan, or a space opened by the human Almighty to suppress the Heavenly Fire Clan. While Morong Yu was looking at the surroundings, Hichu said in his mind, "Now is probably the time when the seal is at its strongest and the Heavenly Fire Clan is at its weakest. If the Heavenly Fire erupts, the entire void will be burned and annihilated by the Heavenly Fire. Therefore, you have to leave before the Heavenly Fire Clan recovers." Morong Yu nodded. After identifying a direction, he shot forward as fast as he could. There might be some treasures in the Heavenly Fire space. However, these treasures were useless to Morong Yu. His only goal in entering this place was to raise his strength. Of course, if there were any treasures along the way, he wouldn't mind collecting them. However, his target was the Heavenly Fire Clan. If he didn't target the Heavenly Fire Clan when he was at his weakest, when was he going to wait? Morong Yu's speed was extremely fast. However, the Heavenly Fire space was extremely huge. It was like a real world. Morong Yu made a rough estimation. This Heavenly Fire space was equivalent to a divine world. To casually create a space that was as big as a divine world, the Almighty's strength was too terrifying. Of course, after the Heavenly Fire Clan's expert was suppressed and sealed, the energy he emitted filled the entire Heavenly Fire space. It was also very powerful. However, it was far inferior to the human Almighty. It was much easier to destroy than to create. However, the Heavenly Fire Clan couldn't even destroy the space created by the human Almighty. One could imagine the disparity between them. The deeper he went, the higher the temperature in the void. In the end, even the void was extremely hot. It could burn an expert to death at any time. Morong Yu continued to go deeper. Chi-chi, the air became hotter and hotter. The heavenly fire that filled the sky drowned Morong Yu. It was as if he was submerged in water. However, it wasn't water that drowned him but fire. Morong Yu's hair was the first to be unable to withstand the heat. It was directly burned and turned into dust. After his hair, his physical body also started to be unable to withstand it. Murong Yu's face lit up with excitement. He didn't have masochistic tendencies. However, he was indeed happy, because the heavenly fire in the air contained an extremely terrifying energy. While the energy was burning Murong Yu, it also provided him with an enormous amount of energy. As the energy wasn't concentrated enough, the primal chaos furnace couldn't directly smelt and raise his realm. In fact, this was the shortcoming of the primal chaos furnace. It could only smelt and concentrate the energy in one area. However, the heavenly fire's energy was enough to temper his physical body. The fragrance of barbecued meat kept coming out. This is already the limit of what I can endure. Murong Yu stood still and looked ahead. Now, should I temper my physical body and raise its level, or continue to go deeper? Murong Yu's original intention was to go deeper into the heavenly fire space and find the experts of the heavenly fire tribe. Then, he would obtain something from the experts of the heavenly fire tribe. Even if it was just a small piece, it would contain an enormous amount of energy. As long as it was refined by his primal chaos furnace, it would greatly increase his strength. Forget it. Even if I have the Hichu Luoshu, I might not be able to obtain anything from the experts of the heavenly fire tribe. Now let's raise the level of my physical body first. After pondering for a while, Murong Yu sat down with his legs crossed and started to actively absorb the energy of the heavenly fire. Instantly, the surrounding heavenly fire was absorbed by him like a tide. His flesh was incinerated constantly. However, after a few quick scouring with the power of life, the incinerated flesh was restored again. After the restoration, it was stronger than before. This was the fastest way to raise the strength of the physical body quickly. This was also the method that Murong Yu had been using since he was in the cultivation world. Otherwise, if he only used his own strength to temper his body slowly, there were so many super experts in the world, but their physical bodies were only ordinary divine bodies. It was the same even for holy kings and ancestral sages. While Murong Yu was tempering his body with the heavenly fire, Old Man Yu was half lying in the courtyard with a smile. However, his gaze seemed to be able to see through time and space. He saw Murong Yu sitting cross-legged on the ground and cultivating. However, when he saw Murong Yu boldly absorbing the heavenly fire to temper his body, even Old Man Yu couldn't help but be surprised. Interesting. I wonder to what level you can raise your physical body to. Old Man Yu smiled and looked at Murong Yu from afar. His eyes were shining. Was it admiration or not? Or was it just pure curiosity? No one could tell what Old Man Yu was thinking. Suddenly, Murong Yu felt his soul tremble, as if he had sensed something. So, he opened his eyes abruptly. Two beams of cold light flashed past. Then, he saw a strong cultivator walking towards him from afar, a disciple of the Blood Rain Mountain. When he saw the figure, Murong Yu finally knew why his soul trembled. He felt the blood curse. The blood curse could not only make the people of the Blood Rain Mountain feel Murong Yu. When the other party felt it, Murong Yu would also feel it. The other party must have felt Murong Yu's existence, although he didn't know whether the other party wanted to kill him. However, it didn't matter. He had to kill the people of the Blood Rain Mountain. With a roar in his heart, Murong Yu rushed out and met the great saint expert of the Blood Rain Mountain. Although the expert of the Blood Rain Mountain was a great saint, it was difficult for him to walk here. Almost all of his strength was used to resist the attack of the heavenly fire. Obviously, his purpose was the same as Murong Yu's. They both wanted to temper their physical bodies and improve their physical realm. When he saw Murong Yu rushing over, he couldn't help but sneer. However, his smile quickly froze. Boom! Murong Yu took a step and appeared in front of the great saint. He punched the great saint's chest. The great saint of the Blood Rain Mountain was instantly shocked. How can you be so fast here? This thought flashed through his mind, but his physical body had already collapsed. His physical body was just an ordinary saint body. Most of his strength was used to resist the burning of the heavenly fire, so he didn't have time to resist Murong Yu's attack. Therefore, he exploded with one punch. Die! Murong Yu shouted, and his whole body directly crashed into the great saint. Bang! The great saint of the blood rain mountains, shatter body, directly shattered into a cloud of blood mist. Without the protection of his physical body, his soul couldn't withstand a single blow and was directly caught by Murong Yu. Soul devouring. With a thought, Murong Yu devoured his soul. Soul devouring. When old man Yi saw this scene in the heavenly fire city, his face couldn't help but change slightly. Chapter 1276. After devouring the soul of the great saint of Blood Rain Mountain, Murong Yu's soul was strengthened a little. Although it was not of much use, it was better than nothing. Then, he took a big step forward and flew forward. After this period of cultivation, Murong Yu's physical body had reached a new height and could withstand the burning of the heavenly fire. However, Murong Yu did not know that he was being watched by a pair of eyes in the heavenly fire space. Murong Yu's perception was very strong. However, the person watching him was even stronger, so he could not detect it, even if he was a soul saint. Devouring souls, soul saint? The smile on old man Ye's face finally disappeared, and in its place was a touch of coldness. Devouring souls was more disgusting than refining the enemy's body. It was a taboo in the holy world. Many years ago, a soul saint cultivated by devouring other people's souls. In the beginning, that expert was very careful when he devoured souls, so as not to be discovered by others. However, as he became stronger and stronger, he became more and more unscrupulous. Before he became strong, that expert would never devour too many souls in the same place. However, gradually, he experienced the benefits of rapidly increasing his cultivation level. In the end, he began to massacre cities. He killed people in cities and devoured their souls. His methods were cruel and made people develop. In the end, he became a street rat that everyone wanted to kill. However, for a long time, no one could do anything to him because he was too strong. However, his arrogance and conceit had finally provoked a super expert who directly suppressed and killed him. From then on, soul sanctified saints were not treated well. Indeed, soul attacks were powerful. However, if they were unscrupulous, things like massacring cities would happen. Of course, being disliked was one thing. There were still many people who wanted to become soul saints because they were too strong. A cold light flashed in old man Ye's eyes, but he quickly recovered his smile. Kid, you better not go down the wrong path, or you will end up in a miserable state. Murong Yu did not know any of this. At this moment, he had stopped again. As time passed, Murong Yu gradually approached the area where the experts from the Sky Fire Tribe were being suppressed under the watchful eyes of Old Man Yi. During this process, Murong Yu's physical body grew stronger and stronger. What's going on? Why is the temperature dropping the deeper we go? Murong Yu stood up and looked at his surroundings with a puzzled expression. At this moment, the heavenly fire around him couldn't even compare to the heavenly fire from before. It had no effect on Murong Yu's body. Is that Sky Fire Clan expert going to die? This thought flashed through Murong Yu's mind. Thus, he became excited. He couldn't help but be excited. The Sky Fire Race's elite was a super elite that could only be suppressed but not killed. His physical body must contain extremely terrifying power. Moreover, he even had a saint godhead. If Murong Yu could obtain the heavenly fire race's saint godhead, his strength would soar by several major realms. He might even reach the imperishable realm, or even the profound saint realm. Let's go and take a look. Murong Yu's figure blurred, and he already shot forward. What Murong Yu didn't know was that other than him, the others who had entered the heavenly fire space were still struggling. This was because they didn't feel the temperature of the heavenly fire space dropping. Only Murong Yu was the same. Was it a conspiracy or a coincidence? Murong Yu didn't know, but perhaps someone else did. As he moved forward, the suspicion on Murong Yu's face deepened. He realized that the heavenly fire space that was originally burning fiercely seemed to have been annihilated. There must be a reason for this abnormality. Even if the Sky Fire Race's expert had died suddenly, the heavenly fire space shouldn't be like this. Thus, Muronyu brought out the Hichu Luo shoe and wrapped it around his body, protecting him as much as possible. The yin-yang universe cauldron also shrunk to the size of an incense burner in his hand. Other than that, Murongyu's cultivation and soul force were raised to the limit. The moment he felt something was wrong, he would erupt. If he could fight, he would fight. If he could run, he would run. This was because when he entered the heavenly fire space, he couldn't feel the transfer point of the Hichu Luo Shu. Even the transfer point of the heavenly fire space couldn't be sensed. It could be that the Sky Fire Race's expert had affected the space, or it could be that the almighty human had done something. In any case, it was impossible for Murongyu to enter the heavenly fire space through the Hichu Luo Shu. This kid, old man, Yi saw Murongyu walk forward and couldn't help but shake his head. He said helplessly, "Good luck. Don't die, or I'll have sinned." At this moment, the temperature around Murongyu had dropped to the normal temperature outside, and the temperature was still dropping. It's snowing. Murongyu abruptly came to a halt. Looking at the drifting snowflakes in front of him, he felt dizzy and nearly fainted. Isn't this too ridiculous? It's snowing in the heavenly fire space? Murongyu rubbed his eyes, his face full of disbelief. However, when he caught some snowflakes in the air, he confirmed that he wasn't hallucinating. It was really snowing here, and this kind of snow was different from ordinary snowflakes. When Murongyu caught it in his hand, his entire arm was instantly frozen. Murongyu knew that as long as he flicked it gently, his frozen arm would quickly shatter. While Murongyu was looking at the world of ice and snow in front of him in disbelief, a few people were frowning at Murongyu in an unknown space. How did a great saint get in here? An expert said in a deep voice, a trace of doubt flashing in his eyes. Old Yuan, didn't you set up a restriction to prevent unrelated people from entering here? Our big event can't be ruined by an ant. Another person looked gloomily at the silent middle-aged man next to him, who was the old Yuan he spoke of. Old Yuan didn't mind their harsh tone. His eyes flashed as he looked at the shocked Murongyu across the air. His expression was very interesting. Old Lin walked over and looked at Old Yuan. Old Yuan, what do you think? Does this kid have a special physique? He's actually not afraid of your restriction? The others also looked at Old Yuan. They were all experts, absolute experts, and they were even aware of Old Yuan's achievements in formations and restrictions. Although their realms were similar to Old Yuan, and their strength was even higher than Old Yuan's. However, if they were trapped by Old Yuan's formations and restrictions, it would be extremely difficult for them to escape. Among them, Old Yuan's realm was the lowest, but his overall strength was the strongest. This time, their plan was extremely important to them. Old Yuan had set up a large number of formations and restrictions around them to prevent anyone from entering. However, Murongyu had managed to sneak in without anyone noticing. Not even Old Yuan had noticed him. Interesting, Old Yuan's eyes flashed as if piercing through the void. He looked at Murongyu. Huh? Murongyu suddenly realized that someone seemed to be looking at him. However, he didn't find anything after a quick check. In fact, with Murongyu's current strength, even if Old Yuan and the others stood in front of him, he wouldn't be able to feel their existence without using his eyes. The strength of these people exceeded Murongyu's expectations. Our plan can't fail. No one can ruin it. I'll kill this kid. A cold light flashed in Huang Shi's eyes. He was about to kill Murongyu. However, he was stopped by Old Yuan. This kid is very interesting, but he's just a great sage. Do you think he can ruin our plan? If we make a move, just the aftermath of the power can annihilate him. When Huang Shi had the intention to kill Murongyu, Murongyu's heart was instantly enveloped by a strong aura of death. Moreover, all the hair on his body stood up in an instant. Old Yuan, are you interested in this kid? Huang Shi withdrew his murderous intent and looked at Old Yuan with a faint expression. He knew that Old Yuan had always wanted to find a disciple, but for many years, he had never met a suitable successor. Who has the intention to kill me? Murongyu looked around vigilantly, but he still didn't find anything. There must be a demon when things are abnormal. Should I go in and take a look? At this moment, Morong Yu's heart was also a little drumming. He hesitated whether to leave now or not. How can you catch a tiger cub without entering the tiger's den? I'll go in and take a look. If something is wrong, I'll retreat immediately. Morong Yu was a decisive person. After an instant, he decided to go in. It's true that the newborn calf is not afraid of the tiger. This kid is simply courting death. Seeing Morong Yu go in, Huang sure sneered. However, he didn't have the intention to kill Morong Yu. The temperature was getting lower and lower. In the end, Morong Yu's whole body was trembling. This wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that the cold air was constantly invading his physical body. Not only did it freeze his physical body, but even his power was about to be frozen. His soul was also affected. In the end, Morong Yu could only summon the yin-yang cauldron. The yin-yang cauldron suspended above Morong Yu's head, rotating slightly. Flames of primal chaos fell down and wrapped his whole body inside, firmly protecting him. Flames of primal chaos. When they saw the yin-yang cauldron, Huang Shi and others couldn't help but show shock in their eyes, followed by intense greed. At their level, they could easily see the flames of primal chaos. This was because the power of primal chaos was extremely important to them. Therefore, they were immediately tempted by greed. Especially Huang Shi, who was eager to make a move and was about to snatch the yin-yang cauldron. However, Morong Yu didn't feel anything. He kept moving forward and finally looked in front of him with a face full of shock. In the void ahead, a huge ball of heavenly fire was burning fiercely. What shocked Morong Yu wasn't the burning heavenly fire, but it was a finger that was emitting heavenly fire. A finger of a heavenly fire tribe expert. Chapter 1277. A section of a finger. The place Morong Yu was originally at was extremely cold. Even though Morong Yu had opened the Hichu Luo Shu and the yin-yang cauldron to protect himself, he still found it difficult to move. Why was it so difficult to move? It was because the air here was simply too cold. It was so cold that Morong Yu's entire body stiffened. Moreover, it was a fragile kind of freezing. Morong Yu felt that if he took a bigger step, his legs and even his body would shatter because of it. The falling snowflakes contained a terrifying power that could easily kill Morong Yu. A single snowflake could easily kill an undead realm expert, and the undead realm expert wouldn't even have time to react. Since the snowflakes were so terrifying, why was Morong Yu fine? Morong Yu couldn't understand this either. Perhaps it was because of the flame of primal chaos, but the snowflakes wouldn't land on him at all. Otherwise, Morong Yu would have retreated long ago. As for why Morong Yu was so sure that the section of the finger belonged to the sky fire race expert, first of all, the finger was extremely large. Although it was only a section of a finger, it was like a small mountain range floating in front of Morong Yu, burning with raging flames. Just based on this point alone, Morong Yu couldn't be sure. However, there were no snowflakes in the void near the finger. In fact, the void had regained its blazing heat. A single snowflake could kill an undead realm expert, but it couldn't even affect the temperature of this space. What else could it be other than the finger of a sky fire race expert? Moreover, Morong Yu clearly saw that the finger was enveloped by billions of restrictions and formations. It was obvious that those formations were used to confine the finger. This was because Morong Yu clearly saw waves of vast energy fluctuations within the formations, constantly attacking the various formations and restrictions outside. Without these formations and restrictions, Morong Yu wouldn't have been able to get close at all. From the looks of it, the cold here was used to suppress that finger. Who suppressed the Skyfire clan's expert's finger? Morong Yu was incomparably shocked. At the same time, he was also shocked by the strength of that expert from the Skyfire race. This finger that had been severed for an unknown amount of time still had such terrifying power. What if it was an expert from the Skyfire race? Furthermore, the finger was an inanimate object, while the Skyfire race expert was alive and well. He was merely being suppressed. Thinking of this, Morong Yu could not help but smile bitterly in his heart. Previously, he had even wanted to obtain some bits and pieces from the expert of the Skyfire clan. He had overestimated him, and underestimated the true experts of the Saints' world. What imperishable realm? Ancient Saint realm? They were just mediocre realms. Compared to a true powerhouse, he paled in comparison to a true powerhouse. It looks like someone is planning on subduing this finger. Murong Yu thought to himself as he began to retreat. The super expert who could suppress this finger was definitely beyond his expectations. Moreover, once they made a move, just the aftermath of their power would be enough to kill him millions of times. However, under the suppression of these formations, the power of the finger was getting weaker and weaker. This was because Murong Yu could clearly see that the blazing space was gradually decreasing. The snowflakes and cold were gradually drowning the finger. Once the finger was completely submerged by the snowflakes and cold, it would be the same time that the finger was completely suppressed. The speed of retreating was much faster than the speed of advancing. Soon, Murong Yu retreated to a place that he thought was safe. At the very least, there was no need for him to take out the Hichu Luo Shu and the Yin-Yang Cauldron. However, he did not take back these two treasures. Seeing the Yin-Yang Cauldron, Huang Shi and the others revealed a look of greed. They wanted to take the Yin-Yang Cauldron for themselves. However, although they were greedy and wanted to snatch it, they did not dare to make a move. Originally, they were already shocked that Murong Yu could directly pass through the formations and restrictions set up by Old Yuan. At that time, they did not think too much about it. They only thought that Murong Yu had a special physique that allowed him to ignore the formations and restrictions. Although this special physique was almost non-existent, it did not mean that it did not exist. A long time ago, such a monster had appeared. Then, they saw the Yin-Yang Cauldron, even the Hichu Luo Shu. Now, they did not dare to make a move. Why was that? Treasures with the flame of primal chaos were extremely rare in the holy world. At this point, it was necessary to talk about the grades of holy artifacts in the holy world. Ordinary people only knew that there were 6 grades of holy artifacts, from low to holy artifacts. However, holy artifact did not only have 6 grades, not to mention the ruler artifacts that were superior to all holy artifacts. After the ruler artifacts, there were sovereign artifacts. Ordinary people thought that sovereign artifacts were above holy artifacts. In reality, there were 2 more grades of holy artifacts between holy artifacts and sovereign artifacts. Ancestral artifacts and primal chaos ancestral artifacts. What were ancestral artifacts? In the holy world, there was a realm called Ancestor Sage. Their strength was above Sage Ruler. The weapons of Ancestor Sages were ancestral artifacts. Above Ancestor Sage and below Sovereign Sage was the Primal Chaos Ancestral Sage. The Primal Chaos Ancestral Artifact was the weapon of the Primal Chaos Ancestral Sage. In the holy world, holy artifacts were rare. However, the holy world was so big that there were still many of them. However, that was not the case for ancestral artifacts. Ancestral artifacts required ancestor sages to nurture for a long time. The lifespan of ancestor sages was endless. However, most of them could only nurture one ancestral artifact, their natal ancestral artifact. Because it was their natal ancestral artifact, they had to find the best materials. Moreover, they had to spend a lot of effort. As a result, there were very few ancestral artifacts in the holy world. Of course, there were those who nurtured multiple ancestral artifacts. After all, these people were the minority. However, even so, as experts continued to fall, their ancestral artifacts would be passed down in the world. Therefore, although there were few ancestral artifacts in the God world, there were still some. It was the same for primal chaos ancestral artifacts. However, primal chaos ancestral artifacts were much more powerful than ancestral artifacts. This was because primal chaos ancestral artifacts contained the power of primal chaos. Only primal chaos ancestor sages could absorb primal chaos ancestral artifacts. If one had a primal chaos ancestral artifact, it could help those below primal chaos ancestral artifacts to understand the mysteries of primal chaos ancestral artifacts. Moreover, countless people wanted to fight for the primal chaos ancestral artifacts. As a result, Huang Shi and the others became greedy when they saw the yin yang cauldron. Although they were powerful, they were far from the primal chaos ancestor sage realm. Moreover, if a miracle did not happen, they would never be able to enter the primal chaos ancestor sage realm in their lifetime. A great sage who can ignore formations and restrictions and has a primal chaos ancestral artifact. Is such a person simple? When Huang Shi and the others were about to make a move, they suddenly thought of this question. Then, they did not dare to make a move. Primal chaos ancestor sages were the rulers of holy empires. If they dared to touch their disciples, they would be courting death. They already thought that Murong was a disciple of some holy master. Huang Shi was very unhappy when he saw the yin-yang cauldron floating above Murong head. He wanted to kill Murong and snatch the saint artifact. However, he had many misgivings. Don't lose the big picture for the small. The Finger of the Sky Fire Race's expert is not inferior to an ordinary primal chaos ancestral artifact. As long as we obtain this finger, we will have a chance to comprehend the mysteries of primal chaos and break through to the primal chaos ancestor sage realm. Old Lin looked at Huang Shi and warned him, break through to the primal chaos ancestor sage realm. Could they be super experts in the primal chaos ancestor sage realm? That was a terrifying existence that was countless times stronger than a great sage. Among them, Huang Shi was the greediest and the most bloodthirsty. They were really afraid that Huang Shi would not be able to resist killing Murong. Killing Murong was easy. However, if they drew out the super expert behind him, they would be courting death. However, they did not know that there was no one behind Murong. Moreover, he was just a nobody who had ascended from the lower realm. After I break through to the primal chaos ancestor sage realm, I will kill him, Huang Shi said angrily. Then, he sat down cross-legged and stopped looking at Murong. If he continued to look, he was afraid that he would not be able to resist the greed in his heart and kill Murong. I wonder who wants to subdue this finger. Is it possible to fish in troubled waters and gain some benefits? Murong looked at the finger and pondered in his heart. However, he could not completely suppress the finger. Murong decided to leave the place first. After leaving the area, Murong returned to the area where the sky fire was burning. When he reached the limit of what he could endure, Murong sat down cross-legged and continued to guide the sky fire to refine his body. At the same time, he also diverted a bit of his attention to observe the Finger of the Sky Fire Tribe expert from afar. Murong's method naturally could not escape Huang Shi and the rest. However, Huang Shi and the rest only sneered and did not mind. In their eyes, Murong was not even an ant. As for whether it would draw out the super expert behind Murong, Huang Shi and the rest were very calm. This was because if an expert of that level appeared, his target would not be the finger but the Sky Fire Tribe expert. As time passed, the Finger of the Sky Fire Tribe expert was suppressed continuously. As for Murong, he continued to go deeper and deeper, and his body continued to grow stronger. At this point, he could even devour the sky fire. His flesh, bones, meridians, and even his strength had improved tremendously. On this day, balls of black light burst out from Murong's body. If one listened carefully, they could even hear the faint rumbling of thunder coming from his body. Upon closer inspection, one could see Murong's muscles trembling at an even faster rate. His aura, which was constantly growing stronger, spread far and wide. This boy is actually going to break through? Seeing this scene, Huang Shi and even Old Man Yi in Heavenly Flame City revealed expressions of shock. They were not surprised by Murong's breakthrough in Cultivation Realm, but by Murong's breakthrough in his body. Using the sky fire to refine his body, he broke through. Huang Shi and the rest were surprised and felt that it was unbelievable. This was because they had been using the sky fire to refine their bodies, but to no avail. Chapter 1278. This kid must have a way to temper his body. Huang Shi and the others looked greedy when they saw Murong's aura getting stronger and stronger. No matter how strong they were, their bodies were still ordinary saint physiques. It was not that they did not want to cultivate their bodies, but it was extremely difficult to cultivate their bodies. Otherwise, there would be a large number of saints who had reached the level of a saint artifact. At the very least, their bodies would be at the level of a high or supreme saint artifact. However, there were very few people in the holy world who could reach the level of a low saint artifact. One could imagine how difficult it was to cultivate one's body. One of the reasons was that it was difficult to cultivate one's body. Most importantly, the stronger a person was, the less they wanted to cultivate their bodies. Because of their strength, ordinary people would not be able to break through their defenses and attack their bodies. This was what most cultivators knew. However, some super experts knew how important it was for them to have a strong physical body. The stronger their bodies, the stronger their strength. For example, an expert could unleash a strength of 10 under normal circumstances, but that was only on the basis that his body was an ordinary saint physique. If his strength could reach the level of a low saint artifact, he would be able to unleash a strength of 11. If his body reached the level of a medium saint artifact, he would be able to unleash a strength of 12 or more. The difference could not be seen when one's cultivation level was low. However, if both of them were in the Ancestor Saint realm or the Primal Chaos Ancestor Saint realm, both of them had a strength of 10, but if one of them had a strong body and could unleash a strength of 11, 12, or more, the advantage would be obvious. They could easily kill the other party. Therefore, when they saw that Mu Rongyu's body was about to break through, Huang Shi and the others could not remain calm. They also wanted a stronger physical body. If they could break through to low grade, middle grade, or even high grade, their strength would not be doubled, but it would definitely not be a problem for them to become a few times stronger. In fact, they did not know that Mu Rongyu did not have any method to cultivate his body. They also did not know that Mu Rongyu was risking his life to cultivate. Mu Rongyu was wandering between life and death at every moment. If it weren't for his life force, Mu Rongyu wouldn't have been able to cultivate his body like this. Because if he couldn't repair it, Mu Rongyu would have to consume his own power to repair it. However, this was too slow, so slow that it was almost ineffective. No one would cultivate like this. In fact, one of the most important reasons why Mu Rongyu's body could improve so quickly was because he was a chaotic celestial body. The chaotic celestial body, the power of life, and extraordinary endurance. None of the three could be missing. Without any of them, Mu Rongyu wouldn't be where he was today. Rumble. Under the watchful eyes of Huang Shi and the others, Mu Rongyu's body suddenly burst out with a dense black divine light. Waves of powerful auras spread out continuously, shaking the heavens and earth. His strength has increased by at least 10 times. Seeing Mu Rongyu's fleshly body break through to become a low-grade sacred artifact, Huang Shi said with some displeasure. Light shone from his eyes, and the light of greed grew stronger. He couldn't help but want to attack. If it weren't for the imaginary powerhouse behind Mu Rongyu, he would have already attacked. A low-grade sacred artifact fleshly body is at least 10 times stronger than before. The thunderous sounds in Mu Rongyu's body had subsided, and the aura and light emitted from the surface of his body were also absorbed into his body. Feeling the huge power in his body, Mu Rongyu showed a confident smile on his face. Now I can easily resist the attacks of low-level undead experts. Supplemented by soul attacks, I can easily kill low-level undead experts. Before this, Mu Rongyu's soul attacks could easily kill undead experts. However, that was under the condition that the undead experts didn't resist. Once the other party resisted, Mu Rongyu's body would be easily annihilated. Moreover, the other party's attack range was much farther than his. This resulted in a situation where the undead experts could attack him, but he couldn't attack the undead experts. Now, Mu Rongyu could completely resist the attacks of low-level undead experts and rush into the range of his soul attacks to kill the other party. As long as the other party didn't immediately annihilate his body and soul, then the victory would be Mu Rongyu, because he had the power of life. Moreover, a low-grade sacred artifact, fleshly body, was not so easy to destroy. It's a pity that my soul hasn't broken through yet. Otherwise, killing high-level undead experts, and even undead experts, would be as easy as turning my hand. Murong Yu's eyes flashed with a trace of light. A man whose heart was never content was like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Don't stop me. No matter how strong this boy's backer is, I'm going to take action. Seeing Murong Yu was at least 10 times stronger than before, Huangshi finally couldn't sit still and wanted to take down Murong Yu. Old Yuan and the others fell silent. In fact, they also wanted to take down Murong Yu. This was because Murong Yu didn't only have the primal chaos ancestral artifact and a method to quickly temper his body. He might also have other good things. This risk was worth taking. Boom. However, just as Huangshi was about to take action, the various formations and restrictions they had set up finally succeeded in suppressing the finger of the Sky Fire race expert. We finally succeeded. Old Yuan and the others couldn't hide their surprise. Even Huangshi, who was about to take action, temporarily stopped. Otherwise, Murong Yu might be taken down by him. Let the boy go first and get the finger first, Old Han said in a deep voice. Huangshi nodded slightly and took a deep look at Murong Yu, as if he wanted to remember him in his heart. Then, with a flash of his body, he charged toward the finger that they had suppressed with Old Lin and the others. Boy, wait for me to take down this finger before I take you down. Huangshi sneered in his heart, but soon he laughed loudly. This was because he saw Murong Yu walking toward him. Wasn't this killing 2 birds with 1 stone? How could Huangshi not be happy? The moment the finger was suppressed, the strand of Murong Yu's spiritual force that he had left behind discovered it. Immediately, he only hesitated for a moment before he flew in that direction. However, he didn't know that he had sent himself into a tiger's mouth and delivered himself to a super expert. In Skyfire City, Old Man Yi couldn't help but put his hands on his forehead when he saw Murong Yu walking toward Huangshi and the others. He couldn't look straight at him. This boy is simply delivering himself to our doorstep. Should I give him a warning? This thought flashed through Old Man Ye's mind, and then he laughed. The unknown was the most fun. He wanted to see if Murong Yu could survive or escape from the hands of Huangshi and the other super experts. Under the suppression of countless formations, the Sky Fire race expert's huge finger, which was like a mountain range, was quietly suspended in the void. The flames that were originally burning had been completely suppressed. Even the waves that were originally as huge as the ocean had disappeared. At this moment, the finger was like a dead object without any movement. When Murong Yu arrived nearby, he saw Huangshi and the others rushing toward the finger. This was the first time that Murong Yu saw Huangshi and the others. There were a total of 4 of them. They were either old men or middle-aged men. The light emitted from their bodies was extremely intense and glaring. It was like the light in the sky, dazzling Murong Yu's eyes. Under this glaring light, Murong Yu couldn't see their faces clearly. It was so dazzling that even his eyes turned black. The strength of these 4 people was definitely the strongest he had ever seen in his life. Murong Yu was a little shocked. Then, he looked at the broken finger. It was completely black. It wasn't that the light emitted from the finger was black. Moreover, it was too intense. It was so dazzling that Murong Yu's eyes immediately turned black. Murong Yu was even more shocked. This broken finger was definitely stronger than Huangshi and the others. It was more than 10 times or even 100 times stronger. What kind of existence is this Sky Fire tribe expert? Just the severed finger possesses such terrifying power? Murong Yu thought to himself in shock. Because he didn't know Huangshi and the others' realms, he could only judge the strength between them and the finger. He didn't know their realms. However, Murong Yu's heart was soon burning with passion. This broken finger contained such terrifying power. If he could refine it, wouldn't he be able to raise his cultivation by a few realms? Thinking of this, Murong Yu's heart became even more excited. He was ready to fish in troubled waters. At this moment, Huangshi and the others had already arrived near the broken finger. Waves of mysterious power were constantly being released by them. It was obvious that they wanted to take the broken finger, although the broken finger was suppressed by the array. If the array was removed, the broken finger would explode with unparalleled power and easily annihilate Huang Shi and the others. Therefore, what they had to do now was to take away the array along with it. However, this was a huge and difficult process. It was because of this that Huang Shi let Murong Yu go for the time being. That kid is nearby. Why don't we get rid of him first? I'm afraid he'll ruin it. Seeing that Murong Yu was lurking nearby, Huang Shi, who had been unwilling to give up, became restless again. Don't be rash. What can a great sage like him ruin? Old Lin reprimanded. Huang Shi was embarrassed and began to focus on collecting the broken finger. One by one, the seals were thrown out by them. No one knew how many they had set up. After half a day, they finally finished it. Then, the four of them shouted at the same time. They stretched out their large hands and directly grabbed the broken finger. Without any surprise, their large hands directly grabbed the severed fingers. In fact, Murong Yu, who was far away, could already see the smiles on their faces. What a pity! Murong Yu felt that it was a pity. However, before he could finish his sentence, severed finger, which had been suppressed, trembled violently. Following that, a terrifying aura that could frighten and intimidate the myriad worlds suddenly erupted. Murong Yu even saw the broken finger instantly ignite into a raging fire. Chapter 1279. At the sight of this, Murong Yu's pupils abruptly shrank. His body involuntarily retreated. Huang Shi and the others reacted quickly too. However, when they saw that broken finger, who had been suppressed, had regained his strength, they were 100 times more shocked than Murong Yu. They did not know if they had underestimated broken finger or overestimated their own strength. Although they were shocked, they did not retreat like Murong Yu. Instead, they unleashed their strongest attack at the same time, directly suppressing broken finger. Rumble, an incomparably terrifying power erupted from their bodies, causing the sky to tremble as if it was about to shatter. Murong Yu could guarantee that if they were in a saint's world right now, the space of the saint's world would definitely collapse from the terrifying power they unleashed. However, in the heavenly fire space, their strength seemed to be suppressed. Or perhaps the heavenly fire space was even more stable than the holy world. Seeing that they had attacked, Murong Yu's expression changed drastically. He immediately used his fastest speed to retreat to the back. A battle between experts of this level was not something that he could spectate at his current stage. He would have to pay the price with his life. However, even though he was retreating, Murong Yu could still see what was happening in front of him. At the same time when Huang Shi and the others attacked, Broken Finger shook violently. A wave of aura shot out with a bang like a stormy sea. Rip! It was like the sound of cloth being torn apart. The sky full of restrictions and formations that Huang Shi and the others had set up were directly shattered. After tearing apart these formations and restrictions, Broken Finger's strength did not seem to be damaged at all. He continued to charge out, quickly meeting the powerful attacks of Huang Shi and the others. Puff! After a dull sound, the strongest attacks of Huang Shi and the others were completely useless. They were directly annihilated by Broken Finger's strength. This time, Huang Shi and the others were not only shocked, but also terrified. Retreat! Old Lin roared, and the four of them once again struck out with their palms. At the same time, their bodies flashed, and they had already retreated. However, it seemed that Broken Finger was not willing to let them go. After easily annihilating their powers, they transformed into 4 streams of power that broke through the obstruction of the void and rapidly bombarded Huang Shi and the other 3. It was so fast that Huang Shi and the others did not even have time to react. Huang Shi and the others' expressions changed drastically, and their hearts were enveloped by an extremely strong aura of death. Their speed was far from Broken Finger's strength. Just as their figures flickered, the power of Severed Finger had already arrived behind them. They had no choice but to turn around and defend. They had no choice but to resist. The power of the broken finger was too terrifying and could easily kill them. At that moment, Muronyu watched as the four of them's radiances continued to rise. In fact, they were several times stronger than before. It was probably because they were in a life and death situation that they were able to unleash their full strength. He was either facing the power of the severed finger or protecting his own body. In an instant, dozens of broken weapons of different types burst out with different colors of divine light, filling the entire area. Under Huang Shi and the others' control, they whistled as they charged toward Broken Finger. However, it was useless. Under Broken Finger's attack, the Broken Finger either shattered into powder or dimmed and were sent flying. Puff, puff, puff. These broken artifacts were connected to Huang Shi and the others' minds. Once the broken artifacts were destroyed, their minds were immediately damaged. Especially when their natal ancestral artifacts were destroyed, it was especially harmful to them. However, although these broken artifacts were almost all destroyed, they had also consumed part of Broken Finger's strength. Or perhaps, after splitting into four, the strength was not that strong. Bang! 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 Huang Shi and the others' attacks were extremely fast. In an instant, they had unleashed millions of palm strikes against the Broken Finger's broken finger. However, it was all in vain. Even if the Broken Finger's broken finger was divided into four or partially consumed, it was still not something that Huang Shi and the others could withstand. Muronyu watched as Huang Shi's group of four were sent flying. As they were sent flying, their bodies began to crack inch by inch. In the end, they were annihilated into powder and dissipated into the air. What terrifying strength! Muronyu's face was filled with shock as he retreated again and again. As he retreated, he saw Broken Finger's broken finger continue to attack Huang Shi and the others. In the distance, Broken Finger's broken finger was trembling rapidly. Waves of energy were constantly shot out, locking onto Huang Shi and the others and strangling them. These four are dead meat, Muronyu thought to himself. However, his body did not stop as he rapidly retreated. He sensed extreme danger. This was not a place where he could continue to stay. Muronyu was shocked, but Huang Shi and the others were almost scared to death. They had been planning to seal and suppress Broken Finger for many years. They had made countless preparations. They originally thought that they could easily suppress Broken Finger and take it away. In fact, in the beginning, things were indeed going according to their plan. However, they did not know why Broken Finger, which had been suppressed, would suddenly erupt. Moreover, its strength was so terrifying. Even if the Sky Fire Tribe expert was an expert of the chaotic ancestor sage, this was just a broken finger that had been severed for countless years. Where did its strength come from? They could not understand and were extremely unwilling to accept this. However, what could they do? This was not the time for them to be unwilling. This was because their hearts were shrouded by an extremely strong aura of death. If they could not escape today, they would definitely die. Their bodies were constantly collapsing and being annihilated. However, they were constantly recovering. They had to recover. If they did not have a physical body, they would not be able to protect their souls at all. Then, they would be easily annihilated. However, Broken Finger's broken finger was simply too terrifying. The speed at which they recovered their physical bodies was far slower than the speed at which they were being annihilated. Moreover, Broken Finger's broken finger was constantly sweeping over like a tidal wave. In just a few breaths' time, they would be killed. Even if they were super experts of the Ancestor Sage realm, it was the same. They would be completely annihilated. Use the secret method. Huang Shi and the others felt a sense of danger. It was unknown who shouted loudly. Then, Muronyu saw that the light of power on their bodies was becoming more and more intense. With a boom, it was as if the quantitative change had finally turned into a qualitative change. In a breath's time, their light of power rushed to a peak and then exploded violently, rushing to another level. Chaotic Ancestor Sage. Muronyu did not know what realm Huang Shi and the others' realm had been raised to, but Huang Shi and the others themselves knew. At this moment, They used a secret method with extremely great side effects to raise their strength by a large realm. For example, a cultivation method like the Sky Demon disintegration technique. Although it could temporarily raise one's realm, the consequences were not something that ordinary people could bear. Even if they were super experts of the Ancestor Sage realm, they could not bear it. However, it was better to not be able to bear it than to die. Therefore, they all risked their lives. Murong-Yu discovered that after their realm increased, although there was still a big gap between them and Broken Finger, it was much easier. After a few punches shattered the power that was coming at them, they spread out their bodies and fled in all directions. The Broken Finger trembled and emitted a special wave of energy, as if it was very angry. Streaks of energy covered the sky and covered the earth as they charged towards Huangshi and the other three. After shattering the power in front of them, Huangshi and the others did not dare to stay for long. They used their fastest speed and turned into 4 rays of light to escape. However, the speed of Broken Finger's power was not slow either. It chased after them like a shadow attached to the body, like a gangrene attached to the bone. Moreover, it quickly closed the distance between them. Damn it, which bastard said that the Sky Fire Race's experts only have the strength of an ordinary chaotic ancestor sage. This Broken Finger is not just an ordinary chaotic ancestor sage. If I find out which bastard said that, I will definitely kill him. Huangshi fled quickly, but he was cursing in his heart. At the level of chaotic ancestor sage, they could already comprehend the power of chaos. Their strength was more than 1,000 times stronger than an ordinary ancestor sage. It was because of their thirst for strength that Huangshi and the others wanted to take the Broken Finger. This was because the chaotic ancestor sage's body contained the mystery of the power of chaos. They could use it to comprehend it. However, they did not expect the Broken Finger's strength to be so terrifying. Even they, who had temporarily risen to the chaotic ancestor sage realm, could not withstand a single blow. Although there was a gap between the realm raised by the secret method and the real chaotic ancestor sage, it was just a Broken Finger. Murong-Yu's face was pale as he retreated quickly. However, he was also cursing in his heart. This was because when Huangshi escaped, he was heading in his direction. This kid has a chaotic sacred weapon. Maybe he has something left behind by the chaotic ancestor sage. This power should be able to temporarily block the power of Broken Finger. When Huangshi saw Murong-Yu, he could not help but feel happy. Whoosh! As he flew, Huangshi's big hand reached out and grabbed Murong-Yu. Murong-Yu was shocked. How could he avoid the attack of Huangshi, an ancestor sage? He was easily caught. An enormous power exploded, sealing Murong-Yu and the void around him. It suppressed Murong-Yu and made him unable to move. Kid, you can only blame yourself for barging in here. Huangshi laughed maliciously. He felt that it was a pity. Because of the chaotic sacred weapon Murong-Yu had, because of the body tempering technique he had. However, these could not be compared to his life. Whoosh! As he spoke, Huangshi threw Murong-Yu as if he was a shadow. He collided with the power of Broken Finger. Bastard, if I don't die today, I will slaughter your 9 generations. Murong-Yu roared crazily. Chapter 1280. Let's talk about it when you're not dead. Huangshi grinned, but his figure did not stop as he flew forward. There were 2 reasons why he did not dare to stay. One was that he was worried that Murong-Yu could not withstand the power of Broken Finger, so he had to leave quickly. The other was naturally that he was worried that Murong-Yu could withstand the power of Broken Finger. Once Murong-Yu did not die, the expert behind him would know everything. Huangshi naturally fled as far as he could. He could not withstand the pursuit of a chaotic ancestor saint. In fact, after he used the secret method, even an ordinary ancestor saint could easily kill him once the effect of the secret method was over. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In a flash, Huangshi had already disappeared from the heavenly fire space. He rushed out to the surface and quickly escaped. His speed was definitely at the peak of his speed. This is too much. Back in Skyflame City, Old Man Ye's expression changed slightly when he saw Murong-Yu being thrown its severed finger. However, just as he was about to save him, he stopped and did not take action in the end. If you can get through this, it's your lucky chance. If you can't, it's your fate, Old Man Yi said faintly. Although he was still watching Murong-Yu, he did not have the intention to take action. If Murong-Yu knew what Old Man Yu was thinking, he would have sent a punch straight at him. The power of Broken Finger had beaten up Huang Shi and the other 4 ancestor saints. How could he, a mere great saint, withstand it? So what if he had Hichu Luoshu and the Yin-Yang Cauldron? He could not exert enough power at all. At this moment, Murong-Yu did not have time to think about this. While cursing Huang Shi in his heart, he quickly thought of a way to solve this crisis. However, no matter how hard he thought, he could not think of a solution. In the past, he mainly relied on Hichu Luoshu. When he saw that the situation was not good, he entered Hichu Luoshu and immediately fled. Huang Shi was quite sinister. When he threw out Murong-Yu, he sealed Murong-Yu's power. Murong-Yu couldn't even move. Even entering Hichu Luoshu was impossible, because Hichu Luoshu had also been sealed. The hatred in Murong-Yu's heart could be described as earth-shattering. However, this was not enough to get him out of danger, so he became calmer and calmer. However, at the same time, he felt a little regretful. In the past, everything had been too smooth. Relying on Hichu Luoshu, they could be said to be unbridled. Now that he couldn't use Hichu Luoshu, he immediately fell into a situation of certain death. Strength. In the end, it was all about strength. Teleport back to the God Realm. However, Murong-Yu could not sense the divine world at all. The heavenly fire space had isolated everything from the outside world. Unable to enter Hichu Luoshu, unable to teleport to the God Realm, unable to even move. No matter how good Murong-Yu's mentality was, he still felt despair at this moment. Yes, true despair. He didn't want to die, but he couldn't escape at all. Even with his strength, he couldn't undo it. If I don't die, one day I will slaughter your 9 generations. Murong-Yu roared in his heart and closed his eyes. Boom! The moment he closed his eyes, the power of Broken Finger had already ruthlessly bombarded his body. I'm finished. This thought flashed through Murong-Yu's mind. However, he quickly opened his eyes in surprise. Just when the power bombarded his body, just when he thought he was going to die, without a doubt, he was surprised to find that the power that was sealed by Huang Shi had recovered to its peak state. Not only that, but he also felt an extremely terrifying power wrapping around him. It was Broken Finger's power. However, what made him feel strange was that Broken Finger's power didn't seem to destroy him. He didn't even feel a trace of killing intent from Broken Finger's power. What's going on? Murong-Yu opened his eyes, only to see that he was already engulfed in a ball of blazing heavenly fire. Whoosh! He frowned slightly. Before he could react, the scenery in front of him suddenly changed. In the next moment, he came to an unfamiliar space. In fact, it wasn't considered an unfamiliar space. It was still the heavenly fire space. That was because there were heavenly fire everywhere. Murong-Yu could feel that the heavenly fire wasn't any weaker than Broken Finger's power. It could even easily kill an expert of Huang Shi's level. However, Murong-Yu just stood there. Although the heavenly fire had engulfed him, he wasn't hurt at all. In other words, the heavenly fire had no effect on him at all. What's going on? Murong-Yu was puzzled, and he began to observe his surroundings. However, he was stunned after he took a look. Then, he was deeply shocked. What did he see? He was a giant who could support both heaven and earth. A giant with blazing fire burning all over his body. It should be the heavenly fire tribe that was suppressed in the heavenly fire space. Shocking. Murong-Yu was deeply shocked. He wasn't shocked by the strength of the heavenly fire tribe expert. After witnessing the strength of the heavenly fire tribe expert, Murong-Yu wouldn't be shocked even if the heavenly fire tribe expert told him that he was an expert of the supreme realm. He was shocked by the size of the heavenly fire tribe expert. What was a giant? In the secular world, a person who was a few meters tall was considered a giant, right? The giant in front of Murong Yu was much thicker than some of the so-called mountains in the God realm. After all, the giant's finger was as big as a mountain. One could only imagine how huge the giant was. Looking up, Murong Yu couldn't see the upper body of the giant at all, let alone the giant's head. In front of this giant, the sacred mountains in the holy world were really weak. Of course, if there was such a huge giant in the holy world, there would probably be sacred mountains that were thousands of times taller than a saint. Murong Yu just didn't have the chance to see them. Murong Yu stared at the giant in a daze. He was stunned and didn't know what to do for a moment. "Kid, you're actually a chaotic celestial body?" Just as Murong Yu didn't know what to do, a thunderous voice sounded in his ears. Murong Yu's eyes rolled back as the blood and qi in his body started to churn like a raging river. Even his meridians and body were on the verge of shattering. Murong Yu guessed that this was because the person who spoke had already suppressed his voice to the lowest level. Otherwise, if he was roared, his soul would definitely be scattered. "Who are you?" Murong Yu rolled his eyes and replied in his mind. At the same time, Murong Yu saw that the giant in front of him was shrinking rapidly. In less than a breath's time, the giant that couldn't be seen had already shrunk to a height of about 10 feet. Although it was still a giant to Murong Yu, it didn't feel that much pressure. Murong Yu couldn't help but cry out in alarm when he saw the giant that had shrunk to about 3 meters tall. Then, he retreated several steps and looked at the Skyfire clan expert in front of him with a face full of shock. There was nothing above the waist. In other words, the giant standing in front of him only had 2 legs, 1 hip, and half a waist. As a super expert, how could he appear in such a state? If he didn't have a special fetish, then he must have something that he couldn't say. For example, he was suppressed and couldn't repair his body. "It's nothing. The other parts of my body were chopped off by someone and are suppressed in different places. There's nothing to fuss about." After the giant shrank, his voice seemed to have become softer. Although it was still buzzing, it didn't shake Murong Yu's blood to the point of surging. Hearing that, Murong Yu couldn't help sucking in a breath of cold air. Although the Skyfire Tribe expert said that he didn't care, Murong Yu didn't think so. The Skyfire Tribe expert was so powerful, but the person who suppressed him was even more powerful. Moreover, this method was so terrifying that he couldn't recover from it. "Senior, thank you for not killing me." Murong Yu reacted after recovering from his shock and bowed deeply to the giant. If the giant wanted to kill him, he would have been dead long ago. Even if the giant didn't intend to kill him, he would still be dead. He didn't die because the Skyfire Tribe expert was especially merciful. After all, if he hadn't saved Murong Yu would have been killed by Huang Shi. The giant ignored Murong Yu and said, "I met a chaotic celestial body in the past. He did me a favor." Chaotic celestial body? Could it be Zhao Yun? Zhao Yun saved him? Murong Yu wondered. That's right. Zhao Yun saved me when I was young. Speaking of this, the Skyfire Tribe expert couldn't help but sigh. He knew very well about Zhao Yun's death. In fact, the reason he was where he was today was inextricably linked to Zhao Yun's death. However, Murong Yu was shocked. How did the giant know about his relationship with Zhao Yun? He had never mentioned it. What Murong Yu didn't know was that the giant was too powerful. Even with the majority of his power sealed, he could still see through the thoughts of an expert like Murong Yu with a single glance. This ability was probably the legendary omniscient, omnipotent god of the mortals. "Kid, you're a chaotic celestial body. Everyone in the world is your enemy. Therefore, you must never expose even the slightest bit of your physique. However, you can rest assured that there aren't many people in the holy world who can tell that you are a chaotic celestial body. I only had some contact with Zhao Yun, so I could tell a glance." The giant first warned Murong Yu, then comforted him when he saw that Murong Yu was a little nervous. "Senior, thank you for your concern." Murong Yu hurriedly thanked him. "No need to thank me. I can't repay Zhao Yun's kindness to me. If not for my current state, I would definitely help you grow faster." However, at this point, the giant paused, as if he was hesitating. Chapter 1281. Murong Yu didn't say anything when he heard the giant's doubts. He just looked at him quietly. After a moment of silence, the giant actually didn't argue and continued, "I need your help." Murong Yu was shocked and involuntarily took a few steps back. He then looked at the giant with a bitter smile and said helplessly, "Senior, I don't know what realm you're at, but you're definitely very strong. I'm just a great saint. How can I help you?" "I'm indeed very strong, but you don't need to know what realm I'm at. Once you leave the heavenly fire space, you must forget this matter. You can't say a word about it, or your life will be in danger," the giant said in a deep voice. Murong Yu's heart trembled. Why did he feel like the giant was an enemy of the entire world? "Before I ask for your help, I'll give you a rough overview of my situation. My name is Tian Ming. The heavenly fire race didn't have many people, but it wasn't a small race either. This was only relative to other races such as the human race and the demon race. In the heavenly fire race, only the purest members of the heavenly fire race had the right to have the surname Tian. Tian Ming was naturally a member of the heavenly fire race's royal family. This guy's talent was extremely heaven-defying. He was comparable to many monsters who had cultivated for countless years at such a young age. However, young people would always have a rebellious nature. At that time, Tian Ming's personality could be said to be eccentric. He acted alone and did whatever he wanted. While training in the holy world, he only cared about doing what he wanted. Moreover, whenever he saw something unjust, he would intervene, meddling in other people's business. In the end, this guy offended many experts and was hunted down and killed. However, he was saved by Zhao Yun, who happened to be passing by. In fact, Zhao Yun only saved him. Then he left. They didn't have much time to interact. However, Tian Ming saw Zhao Yun as a savior. Not long after, Zhao Yun died. His death was inexplicable. Tian Ming was determined to find out who was behind this. Gradually, he discovered that Zhao Yun's death involved too many factions. Those factions and experts were so powerful that Tian Ming felt despair. What made him feel the most despair and anger was that the heavenly fire race was also involved in Zhao Yun's death. As for whether the heavenly fire race had experts involved in killing Zhao Yun, he didn't know. In any case, the Sky Fire clan was related to him. At that time, Tian Ming was still young and couldn't control his anger. He went to the Sky Fire race patriarch to reason with him. However, the patriarch of the Sky Fire clan flatly denied having anything to do with this matter. On the contrary, he advised Tian Ming not to meddle in other people's business. Otherwise, he would be in trouble. Tian Ming was immediately enraged. He clearly knew that the Skyfire clan had something to do with Zhao Yun's death. Why did the patriarch deny it? This made Tian Ming feel disgusted. Therefore, Tian Ming cursed to the Skyfire clan's patriarch and eventually fought within the clan. But even though Tian Ming's strength was formidable at that time, how could he be the Heavenly Fire clan's patriarch's match? It was directly suppressed. After Tian Ming was suppressed, he began to reflect on himself and felt that he had been too reckless. Thus, he turned over a new leaf. Not long after, he was released. After that, Tian Ming quieted down. However, he continued to investigate in secret. However, the more he investigated, the more shocked he became. The tangled web of relationships and terrifying factions even made Tian Ming lose the courage to continue investigating. As he continued to investigate deeper, more and more forces and conspiracies came to the surface. Those people immediately became anxious. One day, the Skyfire clan's patriarch announced that Tian Ming would be expelled from the Skyfire clan and stripped of his status. After that, Tian Ming was hunted down endlessly. The furious Tian Ming naturally wouldn't allow himself to be captured. He fled while cultivating. His strength grew rapidly. However, no matter how strong he was far from being as strong as Zhao Yun. In the end, Tian Ming was surrounded by a group of experts in the sky above Sky Fire City. A great battle unfolded. The result was obvious. Tian Ming was defeated. Tian Ming was thoroughly defeated. However, perhaps because he was a member of the Sky Fire clan, those people didn't kill him even though they defeated him. In the end, they only cut him into several pieces and sealed him in different places. The Sky Fire Domain was currently sealing Tianmeng's waist, 2 legs, and a finger. After so many years, Tianmeng had gradually merged his legs and waist back together. However, he still couldn't merge his severed fingers because he didn't have hands. Moreover, the Sky Fire Domain was too powerful. Tianmeng couldn't break through it with his current strength. Therefore, if he wanted to break through, he needed to merge his body back together and seek help from others. For so many years, the heavenly fire space had been experiencing periods of weakness. This was his doing. He'd lured people in and promised them benefits to help him. However, it was clear that no one had succeeded. Perhaps they didn't know where Tianmeng's other body parts were sealed, or perhaps they didn't even try to find them. You want me to help you find the other parts of your body and bring them here? Moron, you finally understood what was going on. Yes. If no one helps me, I don't know if I'll be able to leave this place, Tianmeng said bluntly. Before Moron you could respond, Tianmeng continued, Of course, I won't ask you to help me for nothing. I'll reward you handsomely once this is done. Moreover, I'll help you grow stronger quickly and even kill those people who try to kill Zhao Yun. No wonder no one is willing to help. You don't have anything to give them. Once this is done, who knows if you'll keep your promise? Moron, you muttered inwardly. However, regardless of whether Tianmeng really had something to give him, Moron, you couldn't refuse his help. Just because he knew who Zhao Yun's enemies were, he would help him unconditionally. Didn't Hichu know who Zhao Yun's enemies were? Hichu only knew a limited number of them. They were the people who tried to kill Zhao Yun. However, from what Tianmeng said, it wasn't just those people who wanted to kill Zhao Yun. There were many other powers and experts behind them. Moron, you would kill all of them. After all, avenging Zhao Yun was his belief. It could even be said that the reason he was alive was because of Zhao Yun. There is only one primal chaos celestial in the world. If Zhao Yun hadn't died, Moron, you wouldn't have existed. Of course, to put it another way, Moron, you still had to thank those people who killed Zhao Yun. Thus, in order to properly thank them, Moron, you decided to kill them all and uproot their factions. I can help. However, I can't guarantee that I'll be able to help. If you can, then give me some benefits. If not, then forget it. However, you have to promise me one thing. Moron, you muttered to himself for a moment before looking at Tianmeng. Fine. What is it? When the time comes, you have to inform me of the experts and factions who try to kill Zhao Yun. I'll make them regret killing Zhao Yun. Moron, you said coldly, his killing intent surging. Once you have the strength, I'll tell you everything. Tianmeng immediately agreed. Do you know where the other parts of your body are? Moron, you asked. Tianmeng was immediately depressed. He didn't know at all. Because he had been severed into several parts, his thoughts had become independent. He couldn't communicate with them at all. In truth, this was because the space of heavenly fire was too powerful. I don't know where they are. However, if you carry a section of my finger with you, they'll be able to sense each other. As he spoke, Moron, you saw a streak of fiery light shoot over from the distance. Before he could react, it was already in front of him. A section of a severed finger. It was Tianmeng's severed finger. However, the severed finger had shrunk to the size of a human finger, and it didn't radiate any powerful aura or heavenly fire. Moron Yu's eyes lit up as he looked at the severed finger. Although the severed finger didn't radiate any powerful aura, the power it contained hadn't been lost in the slightest. The dazzling light of power directly blinded Moron Yu's eyes. If I can refine it, Moron Yu thought to himself. He was itching to take action. Tianmeng didn't know what Moron Yu was thinking. He knew before because Moron Yu wasn't on guard. Now, Moron Yu's thoughts were extremely obscure. He couldn't sense them at all. This severed finger can sense the other parts of my body. You can carry it with you. Moreover, the severed finger contains an enormous amount of power. If you encounter any danger, you can use it to kill experts below the primal chaos ancestor saint. However, the severed finger's power is limited. It can't absorb power to recover. It doesn't have much left. Therefore, it's best that you don't use it unless it's a matter of life and death, Tianming warned. Kill any expert below the primal chaos ancestor saint. Murong Yu heard this sentence. He immediately felt like he was going to be invincible. Just as Murong Yu was fantasizing about whether he could dominate the holy world, a streak of heavenly fire engulfed him before he could react and attacked his body. This streak of power can withstand an attack from an ancestor saint at its strongest. However, it can only be used 3 times. After 3 times, it will completely dissipate. This is all I can help you with now. Although Murong Yu is only a great sage, he was equivalent to an ancestor saint if he went all out. In the blink of an eye, he went from an ant to a top-tier expert. Of course, he was only Chung Yaojin's 3 axes. After these 3 axes, he would be finished. However, as long as he used these axes well, he could easily kill an ancestor saint. Huangshi's image immediately appeared in Murong Yu's mind. This person was someone he had to kill. Should I use my current methods to kill him? Murong Yu pondered. However, that would be too wasteful. Whether it was the severed fingers attack or the defensive power Tianming left on him, he couldn't use them easily. After all, good steel had to be used on the edge of a blade. Chapter 1282. Tianming had said that there were no benefits, but the benefits he could give Murong Yu were shocking. After all, if he used it well, he could even save Murong Yu's life. What treasure was more valuable than Murong Yu's life? Of course, everyone wanted benefits. Murong Yu was no exception. As a result, he looked at Tianming. When I was killed, all the treasures on my body were taken away. I don't have anything on me. As if he knew what Murong Yu meant, Tianming spoke before Murong Yu could say anything. Murong Yu was slightly embarrassed, but he still asked, "What's with the treasures in the space of Skyfire?" Those treasures were all naturally nurtured by the space of Skyfire. Their fire attributed heavenly resources. However, they're too low-grade. "They're useless to you," Tianming immediately replied. "Who says they're useless? If there's a large number of heavenly resources or saint artifacts, I can refine them and increase my cultivation." Murong Yu murmured inside, but he did not say it aloud. Are there any treasures with tremendous power in the space of Skyfire that aren't treasures? Murong Yu didn't demand anything like a sacred artifact. After all, what he needed the most were items that contained immense power. No. Tianming's firm answer left Murong Yu depressed. At the same time, Murong Yu suddenly thought of the so-called supreme quality saint artifact he had bought in White Sun City, the Astral Wind Secret Light Bell. As a result, he took out the black bell and said to Tianming, "Senior, can you take a look at this supreme quality saint artifact? Is it sealed or destroyed?" Swish! Tianming said nothing, but a powerful force swept the Astral Wind Secret Light Bell away. Afterwards, the Astral Wind Secret Light Bell hovered before Tianming and was enveloped by flames. Soon, the Astral Wind Secret Light Bell flew back to Murong Yu. Tianming's voice sounded in Murong Yu's ears. "I can't tell if it's been destroyed or sealed." Hearing this, Murong Yu felt a little disappointed. He could only put the secret Gale Bell back into his body. What he didn't notice was that when he returned the bell to Murong Yu, Tianming's voice sounded a little strange. What Murong Yu didn't know was that Tianming actually knew about the Astral Wind Secret Light Bell and its origins. But why didn't he tell Murong Yu? He didn't even tell him whether it was sealed or destroyed. These super experts were all crazy. Just when Murong Yu put the Astral Wind Secret Light Bell away into the Hichu Lu Oshu, Tianming suddenly said, "Oh right, I suddenly thought of something. Is it the non-treasure you mentioned?" Afterwards, a fist-sized orb that burned with flames shot over from the horizon. In the end, it hovered before Murong Yu. This is the essence of the flames. It's condensed from a space of flames over countless years. Apart from containing the essence of the flames, it's useless, Tianming explained. It really is useless. Murong Yu didn't even sense the slightest ripple of energy from the heavenly fire orb. However, it was definitely a supreme treasure in his eyes. The light from the heavenly fire orb was so bright that it almost blinded him. To him, the orb was even more valuable than a supreme quality saint artifact. If he could refine it, he could at least reach the undying realm, or even the imperishable realm. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Muronyu put away the heavenly fire orb with a bright smile on his face. At the same time, he smiled and said, "Then it would be impolite for me to refuse. I wonder if Senior has any other orbs like this?" A man who is never content is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. I really don't have any more. After so many years, the space of flames only condensed this orb, Tianming said indifferently. He didn't seem to care at all. However, what Muronyu didn't know was that the heavenly fire orb might just be a toy to others. It had no use at all. However, to the people of the heavenly fire race, it was a supreme treasure. Because it was the essence of the flames, it had the effect of increasing the cultivation speed of the heavenly fire race. Moreover, if the experts of the heavenly fire race could swallow a heavenly fire orb, they would be reborn and have the heaven-defying effect of increasing their talent and aptitude. Simply put, the heavenly fire orb could transform a fool of the heavenly fire race into a genius. Such a precious heavenly fire orb was directly given to Muronyu by Tianming. What was his intention? Senior, then do you have a way to increase my strength? For example, something like enlightenment? You also want to regenerate your physical body as soon as possible, right? However, with my current strength, I really can't do anything, so after putting away the heavenly fire orb, Muronyu continued to shamelessly ask for benefits. Tianming felt a little dizzy. Wasn't this guy too greedy? Yes. If I use up my current cultivation, I can directly raise you to the Sage King realm. Hiss. Sage King realm. Muronyu couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He was instantly excited. He looked at Tianming with blazing eyes. Senior, your strength didn't come easily, so you don't need to raise me to the Sage King realm. Just raise me to the imperishable realm or the profound sage realm. Tianming smiled. You really want to raise your cultivation level? If you really need it, I don't mind. Do I still need to think about such a good thing? Muronyu asked in return. He was already prepared. Tianming continued to smile. I advise you to think about it carefully before making a decision. Because once you accept my enlightenment, your physique will transform into the physique of the heavenly fire race. Although the heavenly fire race isn't bad, there's still a big gap between us and the chaotic celestial body. Most importantly, if you were to be enlightened by me, you will never be able to improve your cultivation. Muronyu immediately smiled embarrassedly. If that's the case, then I'd better cultivate on my own. Tianming continued. It's not just me. You'd better not accept anyone else's enlightenment. Perhaps they can raise your cultivation level to an extremely high level in a short time. However, it's basically impossible for you to continue to increase your cultivation level in the future. Murongyu's heart trembled swish. Just as he was about to continue speaking, he suddenly realized that the scene in front of him had changed. The next moment, he found himself in front of the teleportation gate in Heavenly Fire City. I'm actually teleported out. When he saw where he was, Muronyu couldn't help but gnash his teeth. He had originally planned to continue searching for treasures in the Heavenly Fire space. He didn't need low-grade treasures, but Shangzhen's disciple did. I still have to go back in. Muronyu turned around and was about to enter the Heavenly Fire space again. However, just as he took a step forward, a Heavenly Fire City guard blocked his path and looked at him with a gloomy expression. Everyone can only enter once. If you want to go in, wait until the next weekend period. His expression was cold and murderous. Muronyu didn't have any doubts. If he dared to take a step forward, the city guard would definitely attack. Low-level, undying realm. He didn't care about experts of this level, but there were many city guards near the teleportation gate. Most importantly, this was Heavenly Fire City. If he dared to attack, the experts of Heavenly Fire City would definitely kill him. Unlucky. Muronyu cursed and turned to leave. Little bastard, stop right there. Just as he turned around, a gnashing teeth and an incomparably resentful voice sounded. When Muronyu turned around to look, his pupils abruptly shrank. But soon, a bright smile appeared on his face. What a coincidence! I didn't expect to meet you in Heavenly Fire City. Lichong, how are you? How are your two brothers? Lichong was a mid-level, undying realm expert of the Great Dragon Sect. In the Sea Secret Realm, his two brothers, Liu and Lishong, were both killed by Muronyu. Back then, he had chased after Muronyu to kill him. However, Muronyu had managed to escape. But today they were able to meet again in Heavenly Fire City. It was really fate. Hearing Murongyu's words, the surrounding people thought that the two of them were good friends. But the situation didn't seem right. Muronyu had a bright smile on his face, but Lichong's face was filled with resentment. Could it be that this guy raped this guy's woman? Why is he so angry? Someone pondered. Looking at Muronyu with resentment, Lichong gritted his teeth. Murongyu's words almost made him vomit blood. How are you? How are your brothers? This wasn't a greeting, but a sarcastic one. Endless killing intent burst out from Lichong's body, almost condensing into a substance. Heavenly Fire City prohibits private fights. Otherwise, you'll be killed without mercy. Just as Lichong's killing intent was bursting out, the city guard's cold words extinguished his burning, killing intent. At such a distance, Lichong was confident that he could kill Muronyu and prevent him from escaping. However, once he killed Muronyu, he would be killed by the city guards of Heavenly Fire City. It wasn't worth it. Thus, Lichong sneered and withdrew his boundless killing intent. He merely looked at Muronyu with an indifferent expression and continued to sneer. Of course, he knew that Muronyu was a soul sage. His power had already filled his soul space to prevent Muronyu from suddenly killing him. Why are you so nervous? It's not like I'm going to kill you. Muronyu indifferently replied, then turned around and left. Hearing this, the surrounding people were all shocked. In their eyes, Muronyu was only a first-level saint, while Lichong was an undying realm cultivator. Shouldn't it be the other way around? Lichong sneered and followed Muronyu. You have to be careful when you're so close to me. If I kill you, those city guards will think that you died suddenly. As they walked, Murongyu's voice suddenly rang in Lichong's ears. Soul Sage, huh? Little bastard, I'll make sure you die without a burial ground. Lichong sneered, his voice extremely cold. Murongyu's heart sank as a bad premonition rose within him. Chapter 1283. After saying that, Lichong followed Muronyu back to the courtyard where Muronyu was. He didn't say a word during the whole process. He just looked at Muronyu with extreme hatred. Even after Muronyu entered the courtyard, he still stared at the door not far away. He was like a venomous snake, ready to bite Muronyu at any moment. Muronyu was extremely unhappy, but he couldn't do anything to Lichong. After all, whether he could kill Lichong or not was still unknown. Even if he could kill him, he wouldn't do it immediately. However, other than staring at him, Lichong didn't do anything excessive. Therefore, he couldn't kill him with a borrowed knife. Wen Yi and Gongsun Yu hadn't returned yet. Because he had their soul jade slips, Muronyu knew that they weren't in danger now. Therefore, he didn't bother to care about Lichong outside. He directly entered cultivation and began to familiarize himself with his stronger body. A low-grade sacred tool body didn't mean that Murongyu's body was equivalent to a low-grade sacred tool. Of course, the difference wasn't too big. With Murongyu's current strength, his body was inferior to a low-grade sacred tool. However, if Murongyu was an undead realm expert, his body would definitely surpass a low-grade sacred tool. If an ordinary sacred tool body was a piece of tofu, then a low-grade sacred tool body was equivalent to a piece of glass. Although it was still fragile, it was much stronger than a piece of tofu. In the case of the same strength, which one was stronger when glass and tofu collided? It went without saying. After half a day, Murongyu had consolidated his cultivation and familiarized himself with his new body. His strength was at least 10 times stronger than before. After half a day, Murongyu suddenly felt something strange in the air. Then he extended his ocean-like divine thought. In the next moment, his expression changed drastically. He didn't know when, but a group of people had surrounded his courtyard. The weaker ones were ordinary saints, while the stronger ones were imperishable realm experts. Apart from that, many powerful divine senses shrouded the sky above Murongyu's courtyard. Among these people, there were definitely experts who surpassed the imperishable realm. Profound sage, or even ancient sage. What's going on? Morongyu had a bad feeling. However, he soon realized what was going on, because at this time, everyone outside was talking about Morongyu. Their eyes were burning, and their faces were filled with greed as they stared at Murongyu's courtyard. He was like a hungry wolf staring at a flock of sheep, choosing people to devour. They weren't talking about how handsome Morongyu was, how strong he was, or how talented he was. Instead, is this Morongyu really a soul saint? I've heard that he's only a first-step great sage. However, by relying on his soul attack, he was able to kill several undead experts. It must be a soul saint. Otherwise, how could he kill undead experts? That Li Chong made a solemn vow. It said that he was once killed by Murongyu's soul attack. If it weren't for Heavenfire City, he would have killed Morongyu a long time ago. Could it be that he wants to kill him with a borrowed knife? It's possible. However, I've heard that White Sun City is in an uproar. The Leaf family and Blood Rain Mountain's ancestor-level experts are coming. If Morongyu is really an ordinary saint, then why would they come? It's said that he's a profound sage expert. They're definitely here because of his soul saint. Murongyu's face turned ashen as he listened to the crowd's discussion. That bastard Li Chong had leaked the news of his soul saint. Now, almost everyone was staring at him. As long as Morongyu appeared, these people would probably swarm him. Who didn't want to have their soul saint? Although Heavenfire City strictly forbade private fights. However, rules were always used to restrain the weak and had no effect on the strong. Morongyu knew that if his soul saint was confirmed, those experts hiding in the dark would definitely make a move, knowing that he had obtained the soul saint cultivation method. So what if he offended Heavenfire City? This risk was worth taking. What should I do? Morongyu's face was gloomy as he pondered. He definitely couldn't stay in Heavenfire City any longer. He wanted to leave this place immediately. Who told him to not be strong enough? If he had enough strength, he would directly suppress everyone outside. Who would dare to have ideas about him? However, Gong sending you and when he hadn't returned yet. If he just left like this, it wouldn't be in his character. Damn, the two of them. Thinking of the two of them, Morongyu's heart thumped. When he was in White Sun City, even Li Di, a profound sage powerhouse, had shamelessly detained Gong Sun Ningyu to threaten Morongyu. How could there be so many people in Heavenfire City who had ideas about him? Morongyu now only hoped that when Yi and Gong Sun Ningyu wouldn't come out for the time being. However, they would still come out in the end. Right now, there were probably people waiting for the two of them at the teleportation gate. Once they appeared, they would be detained. However, before they're sure, they shouldn't dare to make a move. I'll go to the teleportation gate and wait for them. Once they appear, I'll immediately take them away from Heavenfire City. Thinking in his heart, Morongyu was about to leave the courtyard. However, right at this moment, an incomparably powerful aura shot over from afar like a vast ocean. In the blink of an eye, it had already arrived in front of Morongyu's courtyard. That incomparably powerful aura poured down like an avalanche, suppressing the courtyard. However, because of Heavenfire City's special relationship, this person didn't dare to be too presumptuous. Morongyu, you little bastard, get out here right now. A thunderous voice rolled over, shaking the countless sages around the courtyard. They couldn't stand steadily, and some even vomited blood. Li Di. When he heard this voice, Morongyu had already recognized the identity of the person who had come. Immediately, he pushed open the door and walked out. He's Morongyu? A first-order great sage? Is he really a soul sage? When they saw Morongyu, everyone's eyes shot to him. Little bastard, hand over your life. Seeing Morongyu come out, Li Di stepped forward with a face full of resentment. A powerful aura seeped out of his body, and wherever it passed, the sages were directly sent flying. Unscrupulous. Damn it. Too arrogant, too arrogant. Those who were sent flying by him all looked at Li Di angrily. However, they were suppressed by Li Di's strength and didn't dare to say anything. Moronyu stood at the door calmly and looked at Li Di with a calm face. Li Di, long time no see. How are you? How's your brother? His words made people vomit blood again. You're courting death. Looking at Murongyu's mocking smile, Li Di was instantly enraged. With a roar, he grabbed at the air with his big hand. He grabbed at Murongyu from a distance, wanting to take Murongyu down. A terrifying aura suddenly erupted. The many experts who had gathered on the street changed their expressions when they saw this. Like monkeys scattering when the tree fell, they quickly retreated in all directions, afraid that they would be implicated. Murongyu, on the other hand, remained motionless in his original position. Instead, he looked at Li Di's large hand that was rapidly approaching him with a mocking expression. Seeing that the big hand was about to grab him, Murongyu suddenly turned his head and looked at Old Man Yi, who had come to the crowd unknowingly, and said slowly, "Old Man Yi, I'm being attacked in your house. Shouldn't you do something? You've already left the vicinity of the house." Old Man Yi said expressionlessly. Murongyu's face was filled with astonishment as he turned to look behind him. He found that he was indeed a distance away from the door. So, he took a few steps back. Whoosh! Just as he stepped half a foot into the door, Li Di's big hand had already grabbed him. The wind was fierce, the momentum was shocking, and the murderous aura was soaring. However, Murongyu was sure that Li Di wouldn't dare. No, it should be said that Li Di wouldn't kill him. He was very jealous of the soul sanctification. Cunning brat. Old Man Yi coldly snorted, and then the big red hand that Murongyu had seen before suddenly appeared above him. However, the power emitted by the fiery red hand was much stronger than what he had seen before. The big red hand shook slightly, and then slapped down fiercely. With a bang, Li Di's big hand that had grabbed Murongyu's scalp directly shattered. At the same time, Li Di's whole body shook, and then his whole person was sent flying. Puff! In the void, Li Di spat out blood. He had actually been injured. Seeing this, the saints who had been suppressed by his momentum before couldn't help but show joy and ridicule on their faces. Who didn't know that they couldn't fight in Heaven Flame City? Moreover, the target was the person in the room. A profound sage was considered a small expert in the holy world. However, in Heaven Flame City, even Saint Kings didn't dare to be presumptuous. Even a dragon had a coil. After slapping Li Di away, Old Man Yi shook his head and helplessly said, "Young man, your temper is still too strong." However, in Li Di's ears, it made him very angry. Li Di walked back, glanced at everyone, and then stared at Old Man Yi and said in a deep voice, "This person is wanted by my Heavenly Fiend sect. He is being chased because he stole my Heavenly Fiend sect's treasure. It's best for unrelated people to not meddle in other people's business." The threat in his words was very obvious. Idiot! Everyone looked at Li Di with disdain. The Heavenly Fiend sect might be very powerful, but Heaven Flame City wasn't an ordinary city. The people in the city didn't fear the Heavenly Fiend sect at all. However, listening to Li Di's words, Murongyu was secretly angry. As a profound sage, Li Di was really too shameless. He actually framed him? He immediately couldn't believe it and looked at Li Di indifferently. "Li Di, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you." Hearing Murongyu's words, everyone couldn't help but be surprised. Even Old Man Yi couldn't help but look at Murongyu with a surprised expression. A great sage challenging a profound sage? Was this courting death? Chapter 1284. For a great sage to challenge a profound sage, if it were an ordinary person, it would naturally be an act of seeking death. However, was Murongyu an ordinary person? He would definitely not seek death. Like the others, after hearing Murongyu's words, Li Di was stunned at first, but he quickly reacted. With a sinister grin on his face, he strode toward Murong Yu. Little bastard, I agree. Immediately leave the city. I accept your challenge. While speaking, Li Di turned around and was about to fly out of Heavenly Fire City. Wait. At this time, Murong Yu stopped him in time. Little bastard, could it be that you want to go back on your word? Not keeping your word? Li Di's face became gloomy, and he looked at Murong Yu with murderous intent. A cold, murderous intent flashed in the depths of Murong Yu's eyes. Li Di's mouth was really too smelly. Anyone who was called little bastard by someone else would be angry. However, Murong Yu did not show his anger. In his heart, Li Di was someone he had to kill. Murong Yu couldn't be bothered to bicker with such a person. Looking at Li Di with a mocking gaze, Murong Yu sneered. Li Di, are you in a hurry to die? I said that I wanted to challenge you. But did I say when I wanted to challenge you? Did I say how I wanted to challenge you? Haha. Hearing Murong Yu's words, everyone couldn't help but laugh. Murong Yu indeed did not say these things. He only said that he wanted to challenge Li Di. It could be now, or it could be thousands of years later. Who knew? Moreover, there were all kinds of conditions. This kid is very crafty. I really thought that he would challenge Li Di, the profound sage, right now. Someone muttered in his heart, but he still looked at Murong Yu with vigilance. They had all seen how crafty Murong Yu was and began to be wary of him. When do you want to challenge me? Li Di's face was gloomy. He looked at Murong Yu with displeasure. He wanted nothing more than to take down Murong Yu immediately. If you were a trillion years later, I wouldn't have the time to waste. Murong Yu looked at Li Di and laughed. I know you don't have the time, because you won't live past today. Today I will challenge you. However, hearing this, the surrounding people were shocked again. All of them looked at Murong Yu with disdain. This guy was simply courting death, and he was in a hurry to seek death. Then why are you still blabbering? Leave the city immediately, Li Di said anxiously. Revenge was one thing, but what he wanted the most was to obtain the cultivation technique that would allow his soul to become a saint. If he obtained it, his strength would soar by leaps and bounds. After that, his status in the Heavenly Slaughter sect would also rise. It was even possible for him to become the most important disciple of the Heavenly Slaughter sect. In fact, as his strength continued to grow, he would be able to control the Heavenly Slaughter sect in the future. At the thought of this, Li Di felt a sense of urgency. As for Li Di's revenge, although the two of them were brothers, in front of the cultivation technique for the soul to become a saint, forget it. Murong Yu remained motionless and looked at Li Di with a mocking expression. I say, even if you are in a hurry to die, can you listen to what I have to say first? Didn't your parents tell you that it is very impolite to interrupt others when they are talking? You really have no upbringing. Li Di's expression became more and more gloomy, and he looked at Murong Yu with an incomparably cold gaze. If you have something to say, just say it. Don't dawdle. Murong Yu sneered. It's true that I want to challenge you, but do you think I will use my first rank sage realm to challenge you? A profound sage? The prerequisite for the challenge is that you must suppress your strength to the same realm as mine. Or you can go home and wait for me to challenge you after I reach the profound sage realm. At the same time, while speaking, Murong Yu's gaze swept over everyone's faces, and he raised his voice. I know that you all want to obtain the cultivation technique for the soul to become a saint from me. You can also challenge me, but of course, the premise is that you must be in the same realm as me. If you can defeat me, I will be at your disposal. But what I want to tell you is that I am not a soul sage. So, shameless. Hearing Murong Yu's words, everyone who originally thought that Murong Yu was an idiot felt that Murong Yu was shameless. If he really was a soul sage and suppressed his strength to the same realm as him, then the one courting death wouldn't be Murong Yu, but his opponent. As for Murong Yu saying that he wasn't a soul sage, although everyone had some doubts, they didn't believe it. Unless it was confirmed, who would believe it? After all, it was a soul sage. Li Di's complexion suddenly became unsightly, and he stared at Murong Yu with incomparably bitter eyes, not saying anything for a while. He had personally experienced Murong Yu's soul attack. Once his realm was suppressed to that of sage, he would die without a doubt. Seeing Li Di's smile, Yu's face revealed a brilliant smile. Li Di, are you afraid? You are a profound sage realm superpowerhouse, yet you don't dare to accept my challenge? Li Di looked at Yu with a cold expression but didn't answer. Even if Yu insulted and ridiculed him, so what? Could it be compared his life? As long as Yu left Heavenly Flame City, he wouldn't be able to escape. Yu, you also know that I am a profound Sage Realm expert, much stronger than a Sage Realm expert. Even if I suppress my realm, it will still be extremely unfair to you. As for me, I have always advocated fairness. Therefore, I will wait until you are in the same realm as me before accepting your challenge. Whoosh! Everyone's gaze landed on Li Di. Their faces were filled with shock. They were all shocked by Li Di's shamelessness. They all wanted to ask Li Di, how could you be so shameless? How could you be so shameless? How did you do it? Most importantly, Li Di's face didn't even turn red after saying these shameless words. This guy's skin was even thicker than the skin of ordinary vicious beasts. Yu was also shocked, and then he said to Li Di, a good disciple raised by the Heavenly Fiend sect. You are so considerate of me. I am truly grateful to you. However, even a deaf person could hear the ridicule in his words. Li Di just looked at Yu with a cold expression, indifferent. Is there anyone else who wants to accept my challenge or challenge me? If you are in the same realm, I will be happy to accompany you. Of course, I will not accept your challenge unconditionally. The challenger must take out a sacred tool, and the worst must be a middle-grade sacred tool. Yu glanced at everyone and said indifferently. Everyone was silent. Before knowing whether Yu was a soul sanctified expert, they didn't dare to challenge Yu. Otherwise, they wouldn't even know how they died. Just a saint, yet you are so arrogant. Simply overestimating yourself. Today, I, Duan Tianping, will challenge you. A cold voice sounded. Looking in the direction of the voice, Yu saw a young man with a malicious expression striding over. The light of power on his body was very strong. He was at least a low-level undead realm expert. Duan Tianping. Yu's expression was still calm, but the faces of many people present changed. Although Heavenly Flame City had extremely strict rules, the Duan clan was also a tyrant in Heavenly Flame City. They usually ran amok in Heavenly Flame City and did all kinds of evil. Although they couldn't make a move in Heavenly Flame City, the Duan clan could use all kinds of methods to disturb you and make you unable to live. And if you couldn't help but leave Heavenly Flame City, you would be killed by the Duan clan's experts. There were many clans like the Duan clan in Heavenly Flame City, but the Duan clan was the most powerful one. Together with the other two clans, they were called the Heavenly Flame Three Hegemons by the people of Heavenly Flame City. Ordinary saints would pale when talking about them. Middle grade sacred tool. You looked at Duan Tianping and said indifferently, you're not my match. What's the use of giving you a middle grade sacred tool? Duan Tianping looked at Yu with disdain, his expression incomparably arrogant. In his eyes, Yu was an ant. While speaking, he even glanced disdainfully at Li Di, who was not far away, with great disdain. Li Di was furious in his heart, and killing intent surged. He wasn't a magnanimous person to begin with. If this wasn't Heavenly Flame City, just a glance from Duan Tianping would have made him go berserk and kill. Without a middle-grade sacred tool, where did you come from? Yu said indifferently. Duan Tianping was furious, but in order to verify whether Yu was really a soul sage, he still threw out a middle-grade sacred tool. Yu put away the sacred tool into the Hichu Luoshu world with a smile on his face, and then flew towards the center of the city. Everyone was puzzled. I only accept challenges in Heavenly Flame City. As for outside the city, outside the city to accept a duel? Yu couldn't help but chuckle. He could imagine that as long as he took a step out of Heavenly Flame City, there would be countless experts who would directly attack him. In the center of Heavenly Flame City, there was an incomparably huge arena. It was left for everyone to settle disputes. Everyone followed. They all wanted to see if Murong Yu was really a soul sage. After the two of them entered the arena, Duan Tianping took the initiative to suppress his realm and was about to attack. Wait, I don't believe you. Just as he was about to attack, Murong Yu stopped him. Then, Murong Yu looked at Old Man Yi in the crowd. Old Man Yi, come and suppress his strength. I'm worried that when he's about to die, he'll remove the seal. That won't be fun. Hearing this, Duan Tianping was so angry that he was about to smoke. Was he that kind of person? All right, he was that kind of person. However, Murong Yu was a saint. Could he force him to remove the seal? Wasn't this insulting him? Duan Tianping was about to scold him, but when he saw the mysterious old man Yi slowly walking up, he immediately shut up. Even if he was from the Duan family, he didn't dare to be disrespectful to the mysterious old man Yi. There were many examples of that. Chapter 1285. Old Man Yi first glanced at Murong Yu indifferently, then waved at Duan Tianping. Duan Tianping did not feel anything, but Murong Yu believed that he had sealed Duan Tianping. Then, it was Murong Yu's turn to perform. Kid, although I've suppressed my strength, you're definitely no match for me. I'll let you have 3 moves first. Feeling that he still had the strength of a sage, Duan Tianping shouted at Murong Yu coldly. The arrogance on his face was very strong, and it was obvious that he despised Murong Yu very much. Murong Yu was puzzled. Where did his sense of superiority come from? You're really letting me have 3 moves first? Although he was puzzled, Murong Yu still looked at Duan Tianping and smiled. Looking at Murong Yu's smile, Duan Tianping suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. However, he did not care. He only felt that Murong Yu's smile was very disgusting. Therefore, he said impatiently, cut the crap. Just do it when I tell you to. The smile on Murong Yu's face became more and more brilliant. He did not speak, but he slowly raised his right index finger. 1 move. I only need 1 move to defeat you. Whoosh. Everyone's eyes were focused on Murong Yu, and they all sneered as if they were looking at an idiot. How could Murong Yu defeat Duan Tianping in 1 move? Was he stupid? Duan Tianping's lungs were about to explode. However, he did not speak and only looked at Murong Yu coldly. In his heart, he was already thinking about how to torture Murong Yu after 3 moves. It was at this moment that Murong Yu made his move. He took a step forward and disappeared on the spot. At the same time, Duan Tianping's heart was suddenly enveloped by an extremely strong sense of danger. With a thought, his body swayed, and he retreated quickly. Although he let Murong Yu have 3 moves, it did not mean that he could not dodge. However, with a bang, Murong Yu directly appeared in front of him. The fist in his hand flickered with a black light as it directly smashed onto Duan Tianping's chest. Suddenly, everyone heard a loud bang, and then they saw Duan Tianping's body explode. Everyone even saw the look of shock on Duan Tianping's face before his body shattered. He shattered Duan Tianping's body with a single punch. Everyone was taken aback. Murong Yu's strength surpassing Duan Tianping's by too much, right? You lost. After shattering Murong Yu's body with a single punch, Murong Yu did not take the opportunity to kill Murong Yu. Instead, he stood on the stage and looked down at Duan Tianping, who had been shattered into thousands of pieces, with a disdainful expression. Duan Tianping was furious. He immediately reformed his physical body and roared, "Bastard, you sneak attacked me." Ha! Hearing Duan Tianping's words, many people around the arena laughed out loud. Did Murong Yu launch a sneak attack? It was clearly Duan Tianping who told him to attack first. He was defeated, but he said the other party launched a sneak attack. He was on the same level as Li Di. They were both so shameless. Murong Yu did not say anything and just looked at Duan Tianping with a smile. To deal with such a shameless person, it was useless no matter how much words were spoken. He needed to use his fists. He used his huge fists to directly beat the other party until he could not even speak. "You're not admitting defeat?" Murong Yu said indifferently after a long time. "Nonsense, of course I won't admit that you launched a sneak attack. Duan Tianping was flustered and exasperated. Do you want to do it a second time? Murong Yu continued to ask with a smile. Nonsense. Duan Tianping almost roared out loud, gritting his teeth as he looked at Murong Yu. At the same time, he had already raised his strength to the limit. Forget it, you attack first, Murong Yu suddenly said. Swoosh. Before Murong Yu could finish speaking, Duan Tianping had already made his move. It was so fast that the surrounding people did not even have time to react. This bastard is so shameless. This was the evaluation of the surrounding people after they reacted. A cold light flashed across Murong Yu's eyes. After Duan Tianping attacked, he took another step forward. He didn't use any special moves, just a punch straight out of nowhere. Boom! The fists of both sides collided fiercely in the void, bursting out a series of huge muffled sounds. Then, the people around the ring saw Duan Tianping's fist and arm explode inch by inch. On the other hand, Murong Yu's fist continued forward and swiftly landed a punch on Duan Tianping's chest. At this moment, Duan Tianping was very hurt, because his physical body was once again destroyed by Murong Yu. Without a doubt, he was no match for Murong Yu. Moreover, Murong Yu did not intend to give him another chance this time. After destroying Duan Tianping's physical body, he reached out his hand and grabbed Duan Tianping's soul in the air. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Just as Murong Yu grabbed Duan Tianping's soul, a huge divine consciousness tore through the void and landed on him, directly locking onto him. Obviously, these people should be the experts of the Duan family. They were warning Murong Yu not to kill Duan Tianping. In the arena, life and death are up to fate. It's fair and just. If anyone dares to break the principle of fairness, he. When a huge divine consciousness landed on Murong Yu, a faint voice sounded in the ears of these divine consciousness owners. These people's hearts skipped a beat, and the divine consciousness that landed on Murong Yu suddenly retracted. Murong Yu was deeply surprised by this, but even if these divine consciousnesses did not retreat, he would not compromise. You've lost. Murong Yu looked at Duan Tianping's soul in his hand and said, I don't accept this. Duan Tianping roared, and an extremely resentful aura burst out from his soul, attacking Murong Yu. He was truly unconvinced. Although he had suppressed his own realm, how could he not even be able to take a single blow from a saint? What Duan Tianping didn't know was that Murong Yu was actually a great sage. However, Murong Yu didn't use the power of a great sage, not even the power of a sage. He only used the power of his physical body. With the strength of his physical body, he crushed Duan Tianping, who was in the undead realm. It was not that Murong Yu was strong, but Duan Tianping, who didn't have any power, was too weak. In fact, this was the common problem of all ordinary sages. They were strong only because of their power. Without power, they were nothing. After experimenting, Murong Yu found that with his low-grade sacred tool level physical body, he was already comparable to an ordinary great sage. One could imagine the benefits of a strong physical body. This could also explain why Huang Shi and the others were so greedy for Murong Yu's possible physical body cultivation method. You really don't accept this? Murong Yu's voice became cold. Little bastard, let me go quickly. Otherwise, I will make you suffer a fate worse than death. Duan Tianping cursed at Murong Yu. Murong Yu immediately smiled. What I hate the most is being threatened by others. And people who threaten me usually die. Before his voice fell, Murong Yu directly crushed Duan Tianping's soul. The onlookers seemed to hear a kacha shattering sound. Soul devouring. After crushing Duan Tianping's soul, Murong Yu's mind moved, and he swallowed the other party's soul. The soul of an undead realm powerhouse was a great supplement for him. It could improve the soul's strength a little. Ding! After Duan Tianping's soul shattered, his storage ring also burst out and fell to the ground. When everyone thought that Murong Yu did not want this storage ring, they saw that he had already collected the storage ring in his hand. Then he disappeared in a flash, killing Duan Tianping and even taking Duan Tianping's storage ring. The enmity between Murong Yu and the Duan family was considered to be sowed. Everyone did not know why Murong Yu was so bold. In fact, Murong Yu had already decided to kill when he was challenged. Kill to establish his prestige. He wanted to let these people see that he was not a soft persimmon that could be pinched as they wished. Moreover, even if he did not kill these people, would they let them off? That was impossible. Swish, several figures directly appeared around the ring. Each and every one of them looked at Murong Yu with cold auras. Terrifying killing intent quickly spread out, and the surrounding void temperature dropped rapidly. Very clearly, these were all Duan family's powerhouses. Each of them had a monstrous aura, and they were at least undead realm powerhouses. Do you want to challenge me? Murong Yu looked at those Duan family's powerhouses with a smile on his face, without any fear. I'll do it. A middle-stage, undead realm powerhouse shouted angrily and jumped directly into the ring. However, he did not dare to be presumptuous and still suppressed his realm before making a move. Murong Yu looked at Old Man Yi, who was below the stage. The muscles on Old Man Yi's face twitched. Did this guy take him as a coolie? Old Man Yi was unhappy, but he still took action to suppress this Duan family's powerhouse. Middle-grade sacred artifact. The Duan family's powerhouse gritted his teeth and threw a middle-grade sacred artifact to Murong Yu, then rushed out in a flash. One move, Murong Yu shouted in a low voice and took a step forward. After seeing Murong Yu's powerful physical body, how could the Duan family's powerhouse still fight head-on with Murong Yu? Close-quarters combat? Therefore, he wanted to use his strength to kill Murong Yu directly. However, Murong Yu's speed was too fast. The moment he made a move, Murong Yu had already arrived in front of him and then punched out fiercely. The speed was so fast that the other party could not dodge at all. A so-called true undead realm powerhouse would have reacted long ago. However, the strength of a Saint realm powerhouse did not match his strength. His mind reacted, but his body did not have time to react. Therefore, with a bang, this person's body was directly blown apart by Murong Yu. Then, Murong Yu stretched out his big hand and grabbed the other party's soul in the air. Puff! This person's soul was directly crushed by Murong Yu, and he died an unnatural death. After absorbing this person's soul fragment, Murong Yu said under the murderous gazes of the Duan family's powerhouses, I forgot to tell you that if you want to challenge me, the price is not only a middle-grade sacred artifact, but also your life. As he spoke, Murong Yu was secretly pleased. Now, he hoped that more and more people would challenge him, because not only could he obtain the challenger's sacred artifacts and other treasures, but he could also obtain their souls. The stronger their strength, the stronger their souls. After Murong Yu devoured them, his soul realm would also be improved greatly. Chapter 1286. Gong Sun Yu, and when he had not come out of the Skyfire space yet. Before they came out, Murong Yu would not abandon them and leave alone. Gong Sun Yu's background was desolate, so Murong Yu would definitely not abandon her. Although when he was not very familiar with him, when he might know a soul cultivation technique. This technique was extremely important to Murong Yu, so he could not give up on Wen-Yi, since he could not leave Skyfire City for the time being, and these people wanted to get his so-called soul sanctification technique. So why not get some benefits from these people? Sacred tools and various treasures. And after killing them, he could devour their soul fragments to improve his soul level. This was a good thing for Murong Yu. Moreover, Murong Yu did not have any psychological burden at all when killing these people and devouring their souls. After all, which of these people who challenged him did not want to take him down and force him to reveal the soul sanctification technique? Moreover, Murong Yu was not afraid of offending the forces behind these people. Anyway, they would not let him go, so it was not too much to take some interest before they made a move, right? Looking at Murong Yu in the arena, everyone in the arena was stunned. They had been subdued by Murong Yu's viciousness and strength. How is this kid so strong? Could it be that he is not a saint at all? Some people discussed, not believing in Murong Yu's strength at all. It's possible that he is a great saint or an undead realm expert, but disguised as a saint. Otherwise, if he is really a saint, how can he kill an expert of the same realm with a punch? You cheated. An undead realm expert of the Duan clan jumped into the arena and roared at Muronyu. Hearing his words, Muronyu could not help but laugh. He cheated? He did not use his full strength at all. Okay? You want to challenge me? Muronyu looked at the other party and smiled faintly. In his eyes, this person was not here to challenge him, but to give him treasures and souls. The Duan clan expert took out a mid-grade sacred tool from his storage ring and looked at Muronyu with murderous intent, then turned to look at Elder Yi. He bowed respectfully to Elder Yi and said, Elder Yi, please seal his realm. We need fairness. Elder Yi shook his head. Of course, he could see that Muronyu did not use any strength at all. But in the end, he did not say anything and just waved his hand at Muronyu, directly sealing his realm of the Saint Realm. Muronyu's face still had a faint smile. The sealed realm did not have any restrictions on him. Kill. The instant Muronyu's cultivation was sealed, the Duan family's undying realm expert roared. Then, the crowd saw the mid-grade sacred tool that he took out earlier burst out with a dazzling holy light, emitting a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth. It turned into a stream of light and fiercely suppressed Muronyu. At the same time, he quickly punched out, one punch after another, to kill Muronyu. For a moment, the power of the sacred tool and the power of his punches enveloped the entire arena. Even if the arena had a restriction to block these powers, it could not be spread out. However, many of the experts outside the arena still couldn't help but back away. The power of a mid-grade sacred tool was not something that everyone could resist. And this expert of the Duan clan could actually activate the full power of a mid-grade sacred tool. Even if this mid-grade sacred tool was just an ordinary sacred tool, one should know that sacred tools were different from the divine tools in the God realm. The power of a divine tool was actually not that strong, but the power of a sacred tool was extremely heaven-defying. A sacred tool that could unleash its full power generally had the strength of a peak great sage. In fact, some of the better low-grade saint artifacts were even comparable to undead stage powerhouses. When an ordinary mid-grade sacred tool unleashed its full power, it was comparable to a peak undead realm expert, and so on and so forth. In other words, if an ordinary saint could activate the full power of a mid-grade sacred tool, then he would have the strength to fight a peak undead realm expert. Of course, that was only the power of the sacred tool. He himself did not have that strength. Because of this, everyone wanted to get a powerful sacred tool. However, it was extremely difficult to fully activate the true power of a sacred tool. An ordinary saint could not activate a low-grade sacred tool to unleash its full power. But an ordinary saint with a low-grade sacred tool also had the strength of an ordinary great sage. This expert of the Duan clan used some unknown method to actually activate the power of a mid-grade sacred tool to the extreme, having the strength of a peak undead realm expert. When the sacred tool came down, the entire arena seemed to tremble slightly. It was extremely terrifying. The powerful aura even penetrated the arena's restriction and dissipated. It suppressed the souls of some of the weaker people, causing them to tremble. At the same time, they also reacted. Why didn't Duan Tianping and the others use their sacred tools? Wouldn't they be able to easily kill Muronyu? What a pity. Seeing the power of the sacred tool, the people around the arena could not help but sigh in their hearts and feel pity. Of course, they did not sympathize with Muronyu. If it were not for Muronyu's soul sanctification technique, even if he was killed, it would have nothing to do with them. They felt pity that if Muronyu died, then no one would get his soul sanctification technique. While everyone felt pity, some of the experts who were secretly watching Muronyu were already ready to make a move. It was impossible for them to let Muronyu die. At the critical moment, they would step in to save him. That way, they could make Muronyu feel grateful to them, and then they could easily get Murong Yu's soul sanctification technique. If it really did not work, they could directly read Murong Yu's memories. However, Murong Yu was destined to disappoint them. Looking at the sacred tool that came down quickly, Murong Yu still had a smile on his face. In the eyes of outsiders, Murong Yu was just reacting before his death. Murong Yu is dead for sure this time. Not necessarily. Isn't he a soul sanctification practitioner? If he uses a soul attack, that expert from the Duan clan might not be able to withstand it, right? Soul sanctification practitioners are very mysterious. Maybe he has some unknown means? While everyone was guessing, with a swoosh, a ray of holy light shot out from Murong Yu's body. Then it rose with the wind. In the next moment, everyone saw a huge staff standing above Murong Yu's head. Rays of white holy light constantly spread out like water ripples. At this moment, most of the people near the arena, including the expert from the Duan clan who attacked Murong Yu, instantly felt waves of unstoppable waves sweeping toward their souls. It caused their souls to tremble, and they even felt a sense of fear. The expert from the Duan clan in the arena bore the brunt of it. Everyone only felt their souls tremble in fear. However, his soul was already trembling violently. Waves of fear were constantly being emitted from his soul. At this moment, the expert from the Duan clan was enveloped by an extremely terrifying force. Soul shock. At this moment, Murong Yu suddenly roared. Hearing this roar, everyone was shocked. Then, they all looked at Murong Yu with greed in their eyes. However, the expert from the Duan clan in the arena had a look of fear on his face. Swoosh! At the same time, when Murong Yu launched his soul attack, some of the experts who were watching him in the dark finally lost their composure. They suddenly stood up from their chairs and looked at Murong Yu with burning eyes that pierced through the endless space and time. Some of the experts even had energy fluctuations and were about to attack. However, for some unknown reason, they did not immediately attack. Perhaps they wanted to verify if Murong Yu was really using a soul attack. This was because before Murong Yu roared, the terrifying soul flame of chaos had already rushed into his spiritual space. Immediately, he wanted to use his saint power to resist or even destroy the soul flame of chaos. However, he could only use the power of a saint. How could he resist Murong Yu's soul flame of chaos? Like blowing dry leaves, the Duan clan expert's energy that filled the entire spiritual space was directly crushed. Then, Murong Yu's soul flame of chaos drove straight in and directly bombarded his soul. How could an ordinary soul resist Murong Yu's one-star soul attack? As soon as they came into contact, the Duan clan expert's soul had already been crushed into millions of pieces. However, it was not annihilated. This was because Murong Yu needed his soul. Thud! Thud! The sound of two heavy objects falling to the ground could be heard. After his soul was crushed, the Duan clan's undead realm expert immediately died and fell to the ground with a dull thud. The other dull thud was the middle-grade sacred weapon that had lost the control of the Duan clan expert was slapped into the arena by Murong Yu. The sound was not very loud, but in the ears of the crowd, it was like two thunderclaps, shaking them until they were a little dizzy. It was really a soul saint. Was this a soul attack? How terrifying! The Duan clan expert was at the peak of the undead realm, but he was killed before he could even touch the corner of Murong Yu's clothes. Everyone stared blankly at Murong Yu in the arena, their hearts filled with shock. Then, they saw a rod floating above Murong Yu's head. It was actually the dragon bone flaming needle. Sigh, I didn't want to reveal my trump cards so early. But who asked you to be so powerful? Murong Yu shook his head and said helplessly as he collected the Duan clan expert's storage ring and the middle-grade sacred weapon. A soul attack sacred weapon. Is it only a soul attack sacred weapon? Didn't they say that Murong Yu was a soul saint himself? Everyone was puzzled and began to discuss. Murong Yu had already collected the treasure, storage ring, and even absorbed the Duan clan expert's soul fragments. Of course, it was not just the power of the dragon bone flaming needle. His soul power was attached to the dragon bone flaming needle. Otherwise, the dragon bone flaming needle would not have been able to kill the Duan clan expert instantly. Is there anyone else who wants to challenge me? Murong stood in the arena with a smile, and his gaze slowly swept across the faces of the crowd. Finally, his gaze landed on the ashen-faced Li Chong, who was not far away from the arena. Chapter 12, 87. In the crowd, Li Chong glared at Murong with a venomous look. His face was livid. Even now, he wasn't sure if Murong soul had really become a saint. After all, he had witnessed how Murong soul killed the expert from the Duan clan. Was it really because of the soul's sacred weapon, or Murong own strength? Li Chong wasn't sure, and neither were the people around him. Even the experts hiding in the dark were the same. Only Old Man Yi had a smile on his face. No one knew what he was thinking. Li Chong, I've killed 2 of your brothers. Don't you want to take revenge? Now I'm giving you a chance to take revenge. If you can kill me in the arena, not only can you take revenge, but you can also get all the treasures on me. Murong suddenly laughed as he looked at Li Chong. Li Chong's face changed drastically. He looked coldly at Murong but didn't say anything. If he didn't suppress his realm, he would be the first to rush up. But now, didn't he see that a few undead realm experts had been killed by Murong? Therefore, although Li Chong wanted to kill Murong with one punch, he remained silent. Whoosh! Everyone's eyes were on Li Chong, but there was no disdain or contempt in their eyes. There was only sympathy. Yes, sympathy, because they all knew how terrifying Murong was. Once he went up to the arena, he would be courting death. Sky Flame City is full of experts. Is there no one who dares to challenge me? Standing in the arena, Murong looked down at the world in high spirits. But there was a feeling of loneliness as an expert. Silence. Everyone was silent. Murong asked several times, but no one challenged him. He couldn't help but feel dispirited. Seeing Murong being so arrogant, many experts in Sky Flame City couldn't help but want to teach him a lesson. But they were afraid of Murong's soul attack, so no one dared to step forward. Even the experts hiding in the dark were the same. They were afraid that they would fail miserably. After all, if an imperishable realm or profound sage realm expert was defeated or even killed by Murong in the arena, it would be a huge loss. Thus, Murong's unparalleled reputation was established. However, they were thrown into the endless abyss. Even if they died, they would be laughed at by others. There are so many experts in Heavenly Flame City, but no one dares to challenge me. I'm really disappointed. Murong shook his head and took a step forward. His figure disappeared from the arena in a flash. Murong's plan to collect the treasures and soul fragments had failed, and Gongsun Ningyu and Gongsun Ningyu had yet to come out, so he could only return to his room. However, after he returned, his house was surrounded by countless people again. Some of these people were sent by the major forces to monitor him, while others were purely curious. Although Soul Saint artifacts are powerful, they're difficult to control. Sometimes, they can't even be controlled. If one day, the Soul Saint artifact suddenly erupts and injures everyone, then I'm really sorry. Murong's voice slowly spread out from the courtyard. At the same time, the Dragonbone flame needle rapidly enlarged and floated in the air above the courtyard, emitting an aura that made people's souls feel oppressed and terrified. Whoosh! Almost at the same time, the people surrounding the courtyard all retreated, their expressions changing as they looked at the Dragonbone flame needle. They didn't believe that Murong really couldn't control the Dragonbone flame needle. He had clearly said that to warn and threaten them. Moreover, because he had made it clear beforehand, if one day he really couldn't control it, then they would have died in vain. After all, this was a manslaughter. Even Heavenly Flame City couldn't care so much. After summoning the Hichu Luo Shu, Murong returned to his room and entered the Hichu Luo Shu. Hichu, why didn't you appear in the Heavenly Flame space? At this time, Murong suddenly remembered. When he met Tian Meng, he had asked Hichu about it. However, Hichu seemed to have disappeared into thin air. There was no movement at all. Tian Meng was indeed saved by Zhao Yun. However, they had only met once. Furthermore, he doesn't know of my existence. As for whether what he said is true, I don't know. Hichu said indifferently. If what Tianming said wasn't true, and there was some sort of conspiracy, Hichu naturally wouldn't appear, lest this trump card of his be exposed. As the saying goes, one shouldn't have the heart to harm others, but one should have the heart to guard against others. Then what should I do? Moronyu frowned slightly. At that time, he didn't completely trust Tianming, but he didn't want to break his promise. What you promised, you just have to do. Moreover, if you want to avenge Zhao Yun, you can use him. I only just found out about the few people who did it. It seems like those who killed Zhao Yun are not as simple as those few people. Hichu said in a deep voice. His killing intent was overflowing. That's true. I don't know where the other parts of Tianming's body are suppressed. Perhaps by the time I find all of them, my strength will have surpassed his. At that time, in front of absolute strength, all schemes and tricks will be useless. I can destroy them with a punch. Moronyu smiled and didn't dwell on this matter. Then he picked up the heavenly flame pearl given to him by the Heaven Alliance. Although there wasn't a huge energy fluctuation, the intense energy light was not fake. It was similar to the supreme Saint Weapon Astral Wine Secret Light Bell that seemed to have been destroyed. Say no more. I can't smelt this heavenly flame pearl now, right? Moronyu sensed that Hichu was about to speak, so he spoke first. He couldn't smelt the Astral Wind Secret Light Bell now. Otherwise, he would explode and be completely killed. The power of the heavenly flame pearl was similar to the Astral Wind Secret Light Bell. Of course, he couldn't smelt it either. Don't smelt this heavenly flame pearl. It might be useful in the future, Hichu said in a low voice. What was its use? Moronyu asked him a few times, but he didn't answer him. After putting away the heavenly flame pearl, Moronyu took out the storage rings that he had won or obtained from Duan Tianping and the others. He poured out everything in the storage rings. Upper Saint Weapon. When he saw a battle saber, Morongyu's eyes flashed. The storage rings of the other two experts from the Duan clan were still fine. They didn't have anything like before. Presumably, their status in the Duan clan was different. However, Duan Tianping had an upper Saint Weapon. If the full power of a Saint Weapon was activated, it would be equivalent to an Eternal Realm expert. In White Sun City, upper Saint Weapons were extremely rare. Even Yuan clan, Zhou clan, and the other clans might not have an upper Saint Weapon. As for the Li clan, with Li Di around, they might have one. What's Duan Tianping's status in the Duan clan? He actually has an upper Saint Weapon. Moronyu thought to himself. His big hand had already grabbed the battle saber. If I smelt this upper Saint Weapon and the other Saint Weapons and treasures of heaven and earth, it should be able to raise my cultivation level by a small level, right? Morongyu's big hand grabbed at the air and grabbed all the treasures that contained a large amount of power in the storage rings. Then dozens of different things floated in front of him. There were Saint Weapons, treasures of heaven and earth, swoosh. Moronyu suddenly opened his mouth and sucked hard. Suddenly, those Saint Weapons and treasures of heaven and earth turned into a stream of light and were sucked into his mouth. Then, they all entered the chaos furnace. Smelt. Morongyu's thoughts moved. Then he saw the chaos furnace shake slightly. Suddenly, those Saint Weapons and treasures of heaven and earth disappeared. However, the battle saber that was an upper Saint Weapon had not been smelted completely. Moronyu rolled his eyes. He finally understood why Hichu did not let him smelt the Astral Secret Light Bell. Other than the fact that the Astral Secret Light Bell contained an extremely large amount of power, he could not smelt it. Although the Chaos Furnace was said to be able to smelt everything, there was a prerequisite. That was, Moronyu must have the corresponding strength. With Morongyu's current strength, he could easily smelt a middle Saint Weapon. However, it was a little difficult to smelt an upper Saint Weapon, but it was not impossible. Smelt. Moronyu controlled the Chaos Furnace to continue smelting the upper Saint Weapon battle saber. On the other side, The treasures of heaven and earth and saint weapons that he had already smelted had turned into power that directly entered his body and began to raise his cultivation level rapidly. Murong Yu's cultivation level began to rise rapidly. However, those dozens of saint weapons could not help him break through his cultivation level. He was originally a first-step great saint, but after absorbing all the power of those treasures, his cultivation level only rose to the intermediate first-step great saint. Murong Yu was a little depressed. If it were someone else, after refining so much power, their cultivation level would have risen by several small realms. However, he was different from ordinary people. Hopefully, I can raise my cultivation level after smelting this battle saber. Murong Yu thought to himself and began to smelt the battle saber quickly. Under his efforts, the battle saber began to be smelted slowly. Although the process was slow, it was still smelting after all. Murong Yu's cultivation level began to rise again. Time was like sand, slipping through one's fingers unconsciously. In a flash, several days had passed. The battle saber had not been completely smelted, but Murong Yu's cultivation level had already risen to the peak first-step great saint. He was only one step away from breaking through to the second-step great saint. One had to admit that the power contained in this upper saint weapon was much greater than the dozens of saint weapons and treasures of heaven and earth. Asterisk Hong Long. Asterisk several days later, Murong Yu's body shook violently and a dull, thunderous sound came from his body. At the same time, an aura 10 times stronger than before swept out, and the void around Murong Yu trembled. Second step, Great Saint. Murong Yu had finally broken through. However, after the breakthrough, the upper saint weapon had not been completely smelted. However, the smelting speed had obviously increased by a lot. Originally, it would have taken a few more days to smelt, but now only took a few hours to complete the smelting. However, the purified power could only stabilize Murong Yu's cultivation level, and there was no improvement. At the same time, Murong Yu suddenly sensed that someone had broken into the courtyard. A cold, murderous intent flashed in the depths of Murong Yu's eyes, and his figure flashed and appeared in the room. Then he strode out. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.